それでは。
Allow me to start the Fukushima Nuclear Accident Independent Investigation Commission, the NAIIC. I would like to start the 6th Commission meeting. First, about the working group activities, I would like to give you a report about working group number 1. Mr. Mitsuhiko Tanaka, please. Allow me to be seated. Working group number 1. I serve as a co-chair. My name is Tanaka. In the last meeting, the February 27th, the 5th Commission meeting was held. So what has happened since then? Since then, the hearings on TEPCO have been conducted on the continued basis. And during this time, we've also made an on-site tour to Fukushima Daiichi and Daini power plants. The central control room, or main control room, was also observed by us. I had a chance to meet the shift manager, and we conducted hearings on the person. We will continue to do so going forward. About the nuclear technology, earthquake, and tsunami, the experts in these fields, and also NISA, Nuclear and Industrial Safety Agency, and JNIS, Japan Nuclear Energy Safety Organizations, on these people and organizations, hearings have been conducted as well. Thank you very much. Working group number 2, Mr. Yokoyama, please. Working group 2 focuses on damages investigation. I serve as a co-chair of the working group. My name is Yokoyama. This working group holds hearings on experts in health and environmental impact by radiation. There are some differences in opinions. Double checks, triple checks are what we do. We also analyze data as well. And concerning social damages, the special focus has been made, and hearings is carried out on status of damages with a focus on social damages. And findings from the nuclear accident in Chernobyl are effective materials to reasonably foresee Fukushima in 25 years' time. And we are holding hearings on experts of this accident. On March 19th, in the 7th Commission meeting, we are planning to invite an expert from Ukraine for an open hearing session. That's all from me. Thank you. Working Group 3. Mr. Sakurai, please. Working Group 3 focuses on policy investigation. I serve as a co-chair. My name is Sakurai. Generally speaking, not much difference has been observed since the last meeting. The hearings on TEPCO and others concerned in the accident, including people in the government, have been conducted. And we also investigate issues based on materials. And Japanese and overseas nuclear regulation is also studied in this working group. That's all from me. Thank you. Thank you very much. The Commission is planning to make an overseas study tour from the end of this month to the beginning of April. Mr. Oshima, about this overseas study tour, please. This is really about overseas study tour, and I'm in charge of overseas study tour. My name is Oshima. This will be the first overseas study trip in 2 groups from March 31st to April 10th. We are planning to visit Europe for the study tour. Regarding the purpose, first, in Vienna, Austria, there is IAEA headquarters. We are planning to visit them about the international nuclear regulatory matters. We are planning to conduct some study. And France, this is a typical nuclear country in Europe. We were going to visit this country to do some study. Third, about the damage status from Chernobyl accident, as well as alleviation measures concerning the current status in Ukraine, Belarus, Russia. We're planning to visit these 3 countries to conduct some studies. We'll report the details to you when we come back from the visit. That's all from me. Thank you.
So that is the
study plans that we have. It's already 1 year since the great disaster. For the people who have passed away, I'd like to present my most sincere condolence. And also to the victims and survivors, those people in the affected area, I would like to offer my profound sympathy. The pace of reconstruction should go robustly, and I hope that the people will overcome the sorrow. The community was disintegrated and so forth. I hope that they will go back as soon as possible to the normal day-to-day lives. That is the most sincere wish for us. And also, we must bear in mind the thoughts of the victims, and we must do our utmost in promoting what we are supposed to do. As we have announced on our website, at this commission, the pursuit of the fact as well as the actual state of the accident, we are having a cooperation with the municipalities, and we are trying to cover the status involving the victims through questionnaire survey. The result of our investigation will be compiled in a report which will be issued more or less in June. And the questionnaire survey results will be contained in the report. We will have the question and answer session with our witness today. Today we have Mr. Sakai Muto, advisor, Tokyo Electric Power Company. At the time of the disaster last year, he was the Executive Vice President and General Manager, Nuclear Power and Plant Siting Division of TEPCO. Mr. Muto, thank you very much for coming to this commission meeting. I hope that you will express your unreserved opinions, and we would like to ask various questions from various aspects. Thank you very much for coming, Mr. Muto, and we will commence our discussion session. Now, as the chair of the commission, I appreciate very much for your appearance, Mr. Muto. At the time of the accident, nuclear accident, Mr. Muto, the chairman and president were not in Tokyo, were not in Fukushima. In that situation, you were the person at the highest responsibility in looking after the accident. Japanese people would like to find out the true facts about the accident. Protecting the organization of TEPCO should not be the sole concern for you. I think you should show your sincerity to the history of all of us. What happened at that time, why it happened at that time. Would you be prepared to speak from those standpoints? Chairman and president were away from Tokyo, away from Fukushima, as the top person of the nuclear related matters. I'm sure your work must have been very hard. Mr. Muto, from the line of your business at the actual power plant site, how much experience do you have in relation to nuclear power plant? Thank you. I am Muto of TEPCO. First of all, on March 11 last year at our Fukushima plant, we emitted a great amount of radiation. That was an accident. Irreparable damage was made, and because of this accident, the local people in Fukushima, as well as broadly the Japanese people in the society, we have caused a lot of trouble and inconveniences, hardships, and unspeakable worries we gave to all the people. And the concern still continues even today. As the person actually party to this accident, we are very sorry, and I'd like to present my profound apology to what happened. I am very sorry. Now, Dr. Kurokawa, the chair, has expressed a point. We experienced a very large accident. As a person directly related with the accident, certainly we have a lot of soul-searching points, a lot of things that we have to reflect upon. But as I look back, what was it? How was it? At that time, I was the person in responsible position. So in my own way, to the extent to my ability, I would like to speak and respond to your questions. And I'd like to seek your kind understanding regarding my general position. Now, let me respond to your question. I'm very sorry, but please allow me to speak while I'm seated. Regarding my business background, that was the first question by the chair. I joined TEPCO, and the first posting for me was in Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, which presented the accident. And since then, within the organization of TEPCO, I've been associated with the nuclear reactors. I have come around, I have experienced many different works. Regarding the power plant work, I worked in Fukushima Daiichi plant 3 times altogether. And also in Niigata, we have Kashiwazaki Kariwa nuclear power plant. I was posted there. So altogether, 4 times I was working in a nuclear power plant and executing my work. Thank you.
So
in your own career, I'm sure there are division of the labor. In terms of safety for the nuclear power plants, were you ever posted in such a division or section? Nuclear technology, first and foremost, should start from safety. So I don't think there is any section that has nothing to do with the safety on the nuclear technology. That has always been the tenet for myself. But as the chairperson has asked me, when you speak of safety, there are all sorts of different types of the safety. For our day-to-day work, of course, the safety is very relevant. And whenever we are to first construct the nuclear power plant, we try to anticipate both the things that could happen and that could not probably happen. Everything will be considered in trying to design the plant. And there is a department for this purpose. So if I may take the narrower definition of the safety, if I may say so, I myself, when I was working at the Tokyo office for the Kashiwazaki Kariya nuclear power plant, for units 3 and 4, as well as units 6 and 7, for the construction of these reactors, design for safety, as well as design for the nuclear reactor. Yes, I have experienced being involved with those tasks. And when I was at the Tokyo office, now what I have just mentioned is the designing for the construction of the nuclear power plants. After the plant has been constructed, we need to continue incessantly to improve on the safety with the progress in technology, and as the experience has accumulated, we would constantly try to make revisions in order to improve the level of safety. And I myself have also been involved in such a job as well. Thank you.
From the members of the Commission, there will be questions there. I hope that you will understand and cooperate with us. About the response to the accident. First, Mr. Sakurai. I'm Sakurai, I'm one of the members of the Commission. In our understanding, Mr. Muto, at the time, you were actually the head of the nuclear division. That's my understanding. Now, you talked to us about the normal times, but at the time of the nuclear disaster, regarding the top of the nuclear division, what are the roles and the responsibilities? In the times of nuclear accidents regarding our system, there's a special measures concerning nuclear damages. There is an act or law, and it doesn't just concern electric operators, but the various related organizations must make a plan in advance. And based on the law or act, the disaster prevention, the operation plan must be devised. There, At the nuclear power plant, the headquarters in response to the disaster must be established, and also at our headquarters it must be established. At the nuclear power plant, power plant, the leader is the manager. On the main office, then the president of TEPCO serves as the leader. And my position is to assist the president of the company. In this case, the president was absent. In that case, the amount from the vice president, the head of the headquarters, is chosen. And there, when the president comes back, my position was to assist the president.
At the time of accident, President was absent, and you were occupying a responsible position, and you were issuing. Who was the actual person at the command and instruction post? I think I have to explain to you the general background. In the beginning, last year on March 11th, there was a very big earthquake which hit the place, 246 magnitude, 4.6 earthquake hit the area. And at the head office, the emergency-related people were gathered. When such a huge earthquake hits, there is one thing that we learned from our past experiences. We experienced a Chuetsu earthquake in Niigata Prefecture some years ago. At that time, it was again a very huge earthquake which hit Niigata area. On the power plant side, the plant operation must be under control, and it requires a lot of works. And at that time, within the plant itself, the transformer caused the fire. We are sorry about that. The fire was caused. From the safety standard, the safety importance is not so high. However, it was a fire, nevertheless, of a nuclear power plant, and it was communicated to the whole world, especially the image of fire was communicated to the rest of the world. And therefore, the significance of that fire should have been explained. That is the lesson that we learned from this fire case in Niigata. So we knew that the major earthquake was happening in March. So from the head office, the management people would go to the local area, and then the director of the power plant will be occupied with the operation of the plant. And regarding the communication to the local people, the management from the Tokyo head office would do that. So that was the thinking which went into the formulation of manual. This time around, the earthquake was very huge. So following the lessons we learned from Niigata Prefecture, in times of the drill and exercise, we were doing the same thing. So head of the headquarters will go to the actual power plant. So on the 11th of March, like 3 o'clock or 3:30, I left Tokyo and I went to power plant in Fukushima. So regarding the command post at the Tokyo head office, the managing director, Komori, who was working with me, was the person at the responsibility position in issuing a command at the Tokyo head office.
Next, at the time of the accident on March 11th, first of all, on site, on the ground of the accident, in other words, with Director Yoshida, as well, and between Mr. Yoshida and the head office, what kind of communication was being done? What were the communication actually being undertaken, and the communication that was supposed to be done but not done, if you could comment on both? So the communication between the power plant and the head office, I believe that is the gist of your question. The magnitude of the earthquake was so huge. And in the power plants, and there were the three the units from 1 to 3 on Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, and we have seen the video screen, and we have seen that the nuclear reactor has been stopped. Then there was a huge tsunami that hit the power plant. And the power supply, the emergency power supply, the diesel power supply, that was still continued. And what we have anticipated at the time of design, the operation at the plant was exactly going as we have anticipated. But I believe the crux of your question is, as the accident has progressed, what happened then? After the tsunami has hit the plant, the situation have turned to be very difficult. Because all the AC, this power supply, the external power supply have been cut off. And there are emergency diesel motors, 13 units. All of them they were down. They were not able to be used. And also the DC, the battery, the power supply for emergency purpose that was there, but we were not even able to use that power line either. And inside the power plant, the central control room and the communication with the power plant, the emergency, the team, there were no equipments or the channels to be used for communication. And the emergency headquarters at the plant have tried to collect the relevant information as much as possible to be conveyed to the head office. But the emergency headquarters in the plant and the headquarters at the head office, we had a dedicated the line, the video conferencing the line that was being operated. So at the emergency, the headquarters at the plant, the communication transmission that have been done, and the video image was also being able to be seen. But in trying to collect the information, the biggest constraint was the communication between the site and the emergency headquarters, because there was no tools or equipments to be used for the communication purpose. And because of the gigantic tsunami, there were debris piling up, blocking all the possible pathways. And during the night, because there is no power supply, there are no lights. So people were not able to have a good understanding as to what was actually happening on the site, on the ground.
March 11, when the earthquake hit, you were at the head office, the Mr. Komori. Yeah, Mr. Shimizu was not there. So when did you leave and when did you arrive in Fukushima? Leaving head office, that was about 3:30 p.m., as I recall. But from the exercises, or the drills, when we conducted those things, the head of the nuclear division should take the helicopter. So the arrangement of a helicopter was conducted, and this time that helicopter was arranged for me. The heliport is in a place called Shinkiba. To Shinkiba, I used my car, but there was so much traffic at the time. Liquefaction was pretty severe in certain areas, so I couldn't really get to heliport by car. I had to walk, and also I had to hitch a car and somehow managed to reach the heliport. When I arrived at the nuclear power plant, it was a little dark outside, so I believe it was around 6 o'clock. So when you arrived in Fukushima nuclear power plant, what time was it? Around 7? At 6 o'clock, in the Daini, the ground of Fukushima. And I first landed there, and then first visited the emergency headquarters in the Daini Fukushima power plant.
Nomura is my name, commission member. Continuing on, I'd like to talk about what happened at the time of accident. As you explained, in this accident, the all AC power supply was lost. And that was a major event. That was your explanation. At that time, Mr. Muto, Executive Vice President Muto, at that time, were you aware of the fact that when did you come to know about the loss of power? I don't remember exactly the exact time, but I left the head office, and before I arrived at Fukushima, somewhere in between, I received a mobile phone communication, and I was told about the total power supply loss. I think I received the report. Well, at that time, off-site center, well, as hindsight, it was located in an inappropriate place in terms of distance and so forth. It was created rather close to the nuclear power plant itself. So in a situation like this, off-site center itself was placed in a very difficult situation because of the radiation. Were you not able to assume that beforehand when you got that information firsthand? Did you think of that? Inappropriate siting of the off-site center. The power supply loss was told to me. So without the external power supply, the nuclear reactor safety can be ensured for a certain amount of time. That is the original design concept. With the DC direct current, the cooling system can be operated, and even with the loss of external power supply, it does not directly lead to the damage of the reactor core. So at that time, the off-site center is not functioning. That was not what I anticipated with the contamination with the radiation. At that time, I was not thinking of that. But the station blackout, when I heard about the external power loss, first I was going to Fukushima for communicating with the local people. That was the mandate I was given, I thought. So off-site, I had to go to off-site center. That was something that I thought about it in between.
So just as you have said, initially, the reason why you have gone to Fukushima was to provide explanation to the local residents, but in actuality, you did not give that much of explanation to the local residents, right? Now, in our the predetermined procedures, we were supposed to go into the off-site center. And I believe at the time I wanted to go to the off-time center. But after I have arrived in Fukushima, I have been told that off-site center had lost the power supply. So it was not functional at all. That was a report I received when I arrived at Fukushima. So then, rather than going to the off-site center, I thought that perhaps I should try to provide the explanation to the the residents. The original reason for my visit to Fukushima originally when I had departed Tokyo. So as I was continuously checking whether the power supply have been recovered or not, and in the evening I went to Okawara, the town, and I have met with the mayor. Okuma town, and then I went to Futaba, the town. It was past the midnight, and I have met with the mayor, and I have explained what was happening.
About those two towns that have the nuclear power units, you mentioned those two names. There are those people who live in the close vicinity who had to evacuate from there, and we have been conducting hearing on them as they live in shelter. And people from Namie town, regarding the explanation from the TEPCO, they seem to be quite unsatisfied because they couldn't get the explanation from TEPCO. That's how I understand this issue. Regarding communication to Namie town, it wasn't done sufficiently. Am I correct? Based on the Act on Special Measures concerning a nuclear emergency preparedness, this is the communication notification that there has been a major incident or accident. If it happens, there is a kind of paper that has to be submitted. It's predetermined regarding the substance of the report, including facts. The report or the notification was made. I believe that this has been done. However, the telephone lines, they were so not really functioning because of various reasons. Perhaps the communication was inadequate. Regarding this notification, the communication, I believe that we did our best, but those voices you have just shared with us, we have been hearing those voices from various places. So regarding the communication and the notification in times of emergency, there is still a lot of room for improvement, as I understand. And we caused so much trouble. And I used to live in Fukushima with my family, and I feel very, very sorry about this.
Now, talking about Namiya town, you said that communication was difficult to achieve, but it is on walking distance. So in the first stage, where to evacuate, you could have easily imagined that people would have difficulty in finding where to evacuate. So appropriate information should have been communicated to the people. I think it can be easily imagined. On our side, what is the status of a nuclear reactor? That is something which we have to look into by statute. Article 10 and Article 15 are the relevant provisions. Special Measures Law on Nuclear Disaster, Article 10 and Article 15, we acted accordingly, but was it communicated in an appropriate way to the residents? So there are certain purposes of my going to Fukushima, but at that time, from Daini to Daiichi, actually I transferred by car. The distance is about 10 kilometers. Usually by car, it takes no time. But the roads were damaged and destroyed. Therefore, from Daini to Daiichi, the traffic was very bad. It was very difficult of going. So the communication at the time of emergency, there are so many things which should have been devised as a hindsight. Just a point of confirmation. Outside the site, information was under your responsibility, TEPCO's responsibility? To the surrounding towns and communities, we contacted and we informed accordingly. But regarding evacuation, that is off-site center or the national government, including the local municipal government. It is of the nature of consultation involving those entities.
Now, let me touch upon another point. The other day, what was thought to be not existing, the minutes of the meetings that were being transcribed from the different notes. And at the 1903 of the March 11th, the very initial meeting, the possibility of meltdown has already been pointed out. That is known from the notes. And the Prime Minister's office already knew of that, meaning that the assumption is that TEPCO already knew of that. So when was TEPCO to come to know the possibility of the meltdown of the core? For the nuclear reactor, the cooling of the nuclear reactors, in view of that, the accident could have been stopped, but the cooling did not go on that well. And the cooling to be disrupted means an emergency. Immediately after the nuclear plant has been hit by the earthquake and tsunami, when the water supply will be stopped, that the damages would be seen, to the reactors. Everyone had that kind of possibility in mind in trying to cope with the situation. I do not precisely remember the exact time. I don't think I have the record myself, but I believe it was on the 11th evening that the fuel rod may be exposed. The possibility of that has been reported. Yes, I do recall that. When you say it was reported, that you have reported to the Prime Minister's office through the nuclear power plant, and from the power plant, the information has been conveyed to the relevant parties, including the head office, as well as the relevant ministries, including Prime Minister's office.
Mr. Mitchell, the possibility of meltdown from the power plant itself. When did you get that report from the nuclear power plant yourself? The possibility of the meltdown itself, I don't recall that I received that kind of a report with that wording. So conversely, from TEPCO to the Prime Minister's official residence, or to NISA, when the report was made, who actually received that piece of information? Do you know that? I don't have records with me, so I don't know. Having said that, regarding the situation concerning the Fukushima nuclear power plant, as I said before, at the central control room, the information that could be garnered at the control room was limited. At the time, there was the loss of AC and loss of DC current means that no instrumentation would work. The water level of the nuclear reactor, or the pressure, regarding those things, in order to see them, for instance, the carrying the batteries and with the temporary power supply, one has to read what the meters say. The fact that we were in a very difficult situation was shared, but as you have said, whether the reactor had seen some melting or not melting, that sort of judgment at the time was very difficult, I believe. And the melting of the nuclear reactor, people use the expression, but the reactor is pretty big. First, the central part of the fuel starts melting, but the peripheral part is not melting. So in a severe occasion, the entire reactor would melt. But with very limited amount of data, with a very limited amount of time, it's extremely difficult to make that kind of a decision.
One more point, I would like to ask a question. In the views of the Japanese people at large, there is a sense of distrust on TEPCO's behavior. TEPCO, immediately after the accident, there was a managerial judgment of withdrawing everybody from the actual site. It was reported in the media, or it was mentioned. So as the part of the management, was there such a managerial decision? Was there such a decision existing within the management of TEPCO? Absolutely not. By no means there was such a judgment. In the media, TEPCO reportedly said that all people must withdraw from Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. I think it was reported in the media. I am told about such media report. But including myself, we have never, ever engaged in such a discussion. On the 15th of March, early morning, I think what you're talking about refers to the early morning of March the 15th. But even before that, Unit 2 situation became very difficult. On the 14th of March, from the night of 14th, since that time until the 14th of March, I was at the off-site center. And there, off-site situation was something that I considered, and bearing that in mind, I thought that I should go back to Tokyo. So I consulted with Mr. Shimizu, the president. So in the afternoon of the 14th, I left Fukushima, and I arrived at Tokyo at night. And I changed with Komori, Mr. Komori. So from the night of the 14th until the morning of the 15th, Unit 2 was in a very dire situation. So in that context, at that time, Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, at the main building, there were 700 workers, employees, and people from the suppliers and the affiliated companies. This was the only building available for a safe building to house people, so 700 people. But unit number 2 was something that we had to put under control. So all kinds of operations were tried. So we had to do something about it, unit 2. That occupied my mind. But 750 people, is there a reason of having 750 people all located in one building? No, there is no such reason. So from the actual local site in Fukushima, there were some opinions to that effect. So in that situation, except some people, the remaining people can be transferred to Fukushima city or some other place. We were studying that possibility. But everybody is going to evacuate from the power plant? No, it is inconceivable. It was inconceivable to think about it. We had to put Unit 2 under control. That was a big point. So at the main building, at the Fukushima Daiichi and including Tokyo head office, everybody evacuation from the plant. No, that kind of decision never took place, either in Fukushima or at Tokyo head office.
Now, according to what you have just stated, your judgment was tried to reduce to a more rational number. So how many were you thinking, actually? At the time, within the emergency headquarters in the main office, what would be the procedures to be gone by? I have instructed my people to consider on this. But how many should remain? Who should remain? The main office will not be able to decide. So we had to ask the team at the power plant to decide on who should remain. And actually the director of the power plant, with that intent, have chosen the people to remain. Now, for those people who were not chosen, the word to be moved to Fukushima Daiichi power plant, was it because of the danger, or was it because if there were too many people, then you would not be able to move in a flexible manner? Which was the reason? At the time, the Unit 2 was in a very urgent situation. So there could be certain danger, and we should not have the people who are not really absolutely necessary there to remain. It was not reasonable. So for this decision, the Prime Minister at the time has been said that the President Shimizu have asked for evacuating TEPCO's people, but the Prime Minister said no. Was there any consultation with the Prime Minister on this? Did Mr. Shimizu consulted with the Prime Minister on this question? Now, what Mr. Shimizu have explained to the Prime Minister's office is, as I have just explained to you, for some of our employees to be moved to the rear. That was the intent of what Mr. Shimizu have explained. And Mr. Shimizu, at the very early hour in the morning, was asked by the Prime Minister to come. And the Prime Minister has asked the question. And as I understood it, Mr. Shimizu have explained that that was not the reason, that the reason was, as I have just explained earlier. And in the Parliament, I do understand that the answer was already given to the same question. And I believe Mr. Shimizu has already stated his intent, as I have just indicated. Okay, thank you.
Regarding that, perhaps there was not good communication about Prime Minister's office and so on. A lot of the documents are available. So Mr. Shimizu went to Prime Minister's office and spoke with the Prime Minister Khan. So at the time, perhaps that's how it was understood or how it was perceived. It would be difficult for you to talk about this because you were not there. But any comment? Would you like to make any comment on that? It was a very urgent situation, and through video conferencing regarding what the nuclear power plant said, it was shared what the situation was at the nuclear power plant, what they wanted to do. There are those words, and there were unexpressed things at the same time, and we believe that there was a system that we were able to sort of feel those things. Having said that, when there is such a distance from there, the dire situation of that, the actual place, their intent or what we are thinking, I'm just speaking in general, but communicating those things can be difficult. I think it's true, generally speaking. So at the time, regarding communication with Prime Minister's office, that there wasn't a very good communication. Was that what you felt when you went back to the head office? This is really the report from the President, Mr. Shimizu, so it can be very difficult for you to say. Prime Minister Khan came at very early morning, and in the full evacuation, all the evacuating and all the people would be simply unthinkable. That's what was expressed. But we were not thinking about that. So it was. I felt very uncomfortable about that.
May I present a question? It's a many-parted question. My name is Tanaka. I'm a commission member. So, continuing on with the discussion, with the Tokyo head office and the 2 sites and off-site center, 4 places, a video conference system connecting 4 places. And I looked at that. And regarding what we discussed just now, I have closely looked into what actually happened 5:30 in the morning of the 15th. According to the videotape, the time is recorded, so it may not be accurate. But about 5:30 in the morning, the Prime Minister Khan expressed in a very fierce words. It so happens that the videotape of that particular segment does not have any sound, but he looks very fierce. Prime Minister Khan is speaking to the main members of the management of TEPCO, and he was speaking very fiercely for about 10 minutes. And according to this videotape, so there were 5 screens, remote sites, Kashiwazaki included, Kashiwazaki Daiichi and Fukushima Daiichi Daini Offsite Center and Tokyo head office. So it was 5-screened video conference. So I was looking at that. Then Prime Minister Khan, Minister Kaiyeda of METI, and if I remember correctly, Mr. Madarame, the chairman of Nuclear Safety Commission of Japan, from the rear view, I sensed it was Mr. Madarame. As was mentioned just now, Prime Minister Khan, did he speak at that meeting, early morning meeting? What did he say? He used very harsh words, and all evacuation from a TEPCO site not possible. That's what he said. And he was chiding us, he was scolding us very fiercely and severely. For as long as 10 minutes he was speaking, and all screens froze in a way. Fukushima Daiichi people, you said Fukushima, the unit number 2 was in a very unstable condition, and you had to take care of unit 2. So the main building of Fukushima Daiichi, including Director Yoshida, a lot of people were packed in a room, and they are listening to Prime Minister Kan's remarks. So after that, 10-minute speech was over by Prime Minister Kan, and then people moved to a different room, a smaller room. And again, Prime Minister Kan, or across the table, there was Mr. Muto. You were there, and President Shimizu was there. And they were talking about something. That was the image that is recorded. Then, so if you follow the sequence of events chronologically, this discussion continues until 6:20 or so. And in between, there was some change, some difference, something anomalous occurring, like 6:23 or something. Director Yoshida looks back suddenly. And that was the time of the hydrogen explosion of Unit 4. At that time, Unit 2, Unit 4 exploded, and the decompression occurred, and then there was a big commotion happening. Am I right about the chronological sequence of events? Well, regarding the accurate time, well, I just said the timing from the video record, so my timing is not accurate as well. But it was only a 1 or 2 minute difference. Prime Minister Kan came, and then there was a huge room of the emergency response headquarters room. And as you explained, he gave a speech. We were not thinking, but he said that the all TEPCO people evacuation not possible. We didn't think about that. Anyway, he said that. Then he said that discussion is not meaningful in such a big room, he said. So the management people of TEPCO offered that there is an adjacent smaller room. So we all went to the smaller room, and then we continued discussing for some time. I think that was what happened. And during that time, during that discussion, Unit 4 explosion happened. I think that is the sequence of events, as I recall.
Which means, at the time, from 6 o'clock to 6:10, Unit 2, some unusual sound occurred, and depressurizing occurred. And Unit 4, there was a fire on that, so that was the information conveyed to the general public. Now, but rather than explosion of Unit 4, the Unit 2 was thought to be more worrisome. So for Unit 2, the communication between the main office and the power plant, the team, must have been very critical and crucial. But looking at the video, the 5 television screens show Prime Minister Kan and Mr. Muto, Mr. Shimizu. When you're watching the screen, when you look back, suddenly look back. So, which means something happened, something unusual happened. And then Mr. Yoshida, they have taken up the helmet and have worn the helmet. And then Prime Minister Kan, there was shaking his hand as if it seemed that you need to go away. And it seems that all of you were rushing, so to speak. So Unit 4, so looked from now. At the time, Unit 2 was thought to be in a very dangerous situation. Units 1 and 3, it was as they were. And in the period of 50 minutes or so, there have been no care been undertaken for Unit 4 at all. So what was your understanding at the time? for the power plant, what was happening on the site? Actually, it was the emergency at headquarters on the plant, or the people at the central control room. They were watching the screens and the gauges and instruments, and whatever happened, they would have to take action. But when we went into the smaller room, and the video conferencing unit was also installed in the small room, so we have had the system connected. So we were watching the screen and looking at what was actually happening. And for the big room of the nuclear emergency response at headquarters, there were some executives remaining. So I'm sure as to what was happening at the power plant had been understood, fully understood by those people. But we were discussing with the Prime Minister, and that is true. So as I watch the video, the record, including Mr. Muto, you yourself, the offsite center, and the communication with the central control unit, it seems that communication has been done frequently. What is the water level and so forth, SRV, to do the chattering or not, to open the vent or not, and all those things. So Mr. Muto, you yourself have been making the different comments. So something very urgent is that actually being seen from the screen. But you thought that nothing urgent that was happening, including myself. What was the role played by the team in Tokyo, the main office? That, I think, has a relevance. Basically speaking, it is true for our day-to-day activities, as well as to a certain extent at the time of disaster, emergency as well. The people the closest to the site has the best knowledge. And for those people, for instance, the emergency headquarters or the main office people who are at the distance, what the people there should do, what we need to do is to provide the necessary support so that the team on the ground will be able to take the necessary actions. And if there is anything we have come to know, we will of course convey the information immediately and try to support the team on the ground. That, I believe, will be the role to be played by us. So the operation on site, I don't think the Tokyo office should instruct in detail. That I don't think should not be the role for myself or for the others at the main office in Tokyo. And if there is any problem, of course, we have the video conference system. So through the system, we will be able to communicate fully. That was the situation at the time, I believe.
So this is what I'm trying to say. You say the site. It's not just the main control room, but led by Director Yoshida. I think you are referring to the people in the main building. Now, am I right? I think it depends on the substance. For instance, cooling the nuclear reactor, the very basic operation, such as cooling the reactor. The persons who are actually doing the operation, they should make that judgment. But in this case, for instance, the venting the containment vessel, then it could have an influence in the peripheral surrounding area as well. So when it comes to that, the emergency headquarters, they're led by the director. They have to be consulted, and then the venting must be conducted. Or understood. I might be a bit too nagging, but as I looked at the videos, the Mr. Yoshida, director, and many people are gathering in one place for dozens of minutes. I got an impression that it was not really functioning well, and I wanted to ask your understanding or your comments on this. Any comments? At the risk of repeating myself. evacuating all the TEPCO employees was not something that we were thinking at the time. And there was quite a fierce discussion on that. Well, and then you were talking about vent. Now I would like to ask you some questions about venting the vents of the containment vessel. There has been so much the report on this. So many people are familiar with the terminology, the venting. But containment vessel, the vent or venting, I'd like to ask you about the significance or the meaning of these words. At Offsite Center, as I've been listening to you, whether to do the venting or not to do the venting of the containment vessel, statements have been made about venting. Mr. Muto, for what purpose vent is necessary? How did you understand it? What?
Are you talking about Unit 1? Well, basically, what is meant by venting? The pressurized the vessel is covered by a containment vessel. So, with respect to this containment, inner pressure goes up, and when it happens that the containment vessel may collapse, may be breached. So deliberately, at a time like that, deliberately you have to release the pressure inside the containment vessel. So in a very tough situation like this, we must watch the pressure within the containment vessel, and we must act accordingly. But the containment vessel has a function of containing radiation. So even temporarily, that is going to be bypassed through the venting. Then the timing is very important. For example, the local people must complete evacuation and so forth. What is the wind direction? These are the factors which have to be taken into consideration. So there has to be a comprehensive judgment to the extent possible. Therefore, this operation, the venting operation itself, can be handled by the operator, but the director of the nuclear power plant is the head of the emergency response headquarters. So we have to listen to his opinion as well. At this commission, two commission meetings ago, Mr. Madarame, chairman of Nuclear Safety Commission, came and we asked a similar question. At that time, Mr. Madarame said, to the effect that he's talking about unit number 1, when he went there by helicopter together with Prime Minister Khan, he said that before that, venting was necessary, he said. Because the nuclear reactor pressure has to be decompressed. Otherwise, water injection is not possible. So SRV has to be operated so that decompression takes place. In order to do that, containment vessel pressure would go up. So with SRV, so he was very concerned about that. So he was talking about the possibility of venting. So that's one aspect, I guess. Actually, watching over the videotape of the video conference, SRV operation chattering, is there chattering or not? Talking about unit number 3, TEPCO people, SRV operation. So they want to do the water injection into the reactor. That was the main point. It was a matter of balance. In the conference, it was discussed. It's a matter of balance. By opening up the SRV, safety relief valve, the pressure of the nuclear reactor may come down, and then from outside cooling would be provided. So you want to cool the reactor, but with the cooling, containment vessel would experience the pressure rise. So venting is one option, as expressed in the discussion. Rather than the destruction of the vessel, the SRV operation is for decompression purpose, and that was the venting purpose. Am I right? As you say, there is steam coming from nuclear reactor, and there is SRV, safety release valve. If you open that valve, the nuclear reactor's pressure will go down, but the steam will be contained in the pool within the containment vessel. So if you keep that situation for a long time, the volume of steam within the containment vessel increases, thereby increasing the pressure inside the containment. But basically, water injection and venting operations are completely different animals. What do I mean by that? Within the nuclear reactor, you inject water. If there is a means available, for example, even the pressure high within the reactor, if there is a pump which enables the water injection, then of course that can be used to do the water injection. In that case, irrespective of the pressure of containment vessel, water injection is possible. On the other hand, containment vessel pressure can rise due to other reasons. Because there are other reasons outside the opening of SRV. Then, irrespective of water injection, the containment vessel has to be protected in order to, and then you have to decompress. So in that case, you do the deliberate venting.
I do agree with you. So let me try to go more into a technical detail. In the normal operation, the containment vessels, the pressure has been about, it's a little bit lower than the one atmospheric pressure. On the other hand, there is a designed pressure for the containment with an absolute pressure or the gauge the pressure. But if we take the gauge the pressure as a unit, 4.37, I believe, 1 kilo or a little bit less than that. So that would be the 5 if you add the 1 atmospheric the pressure to that. So in this specification document, it is written as such. So I'd have to trust that. But when you say design pressure, what does it mean? What the numbers you have just mentioned, I don't have the document with me, so I cannot give you the precise numbers. But when a nuclear reactor is to be built, for the equipment necessary to be installed for the purpose of safety, the strength, the matters at the time of the accident. So the strength should not be undermined with the accident. We need to ascertain and verify that. And when we speak of accident, there are all sorts of different types of accident. If we are to operate nuclear power plant, there could be possible accidents which may have a high likelihood or very low likelihood, or the probability may be very low, but it could happen. There are all sorts of different levels and the different types of the accident. And when you say the design pressure, and looking from the term design, so at the normal times, when we design the reactors, we would try to assume what could happen, even though the probability may be low. So in the case of the containment vessel, we would have to verify whether the strength will be able to withstand those risks. So that, I believe, would be the design, the pressure. So for units 1 and 3, the recycling the pipes, the diameter that was the largest, and when so-called the guillotine destruction happens, and when the pressure about 3 atmospheric pressures or so forth, and you have to have some latitude, some room of safety on top of that, and that should be the design, the levels, the specification. So at the time of design, you have designed so that it would not go up to the 4 or more. So that would be the indicator, right? Was that the indicator at the time of design?
Rather than hypothetical incidents, at the time of designing the reactor, it's kind of the assumed incidents, and then there are certain numbers that you check against. So in terms of designing, this would be the maximum the pressure. Is that generally speaking the design pressure? Is my interpretation right? At the time of design, concerning the safety of the reactor, to ascertain the safety of the reactor, we thought about possible incidents, and certain pressure might be there, and then we used those numbers. So that shouldn't be exceeded so easily. So regarding the design pressure, that should normally be the sort of maximum pressure that cannot be easily surpassed. Am I correct? I have a difficulty understanding what you're saying. That design pressure shouldn't be surpassed so easily. So that should be the maximum the possible pressure for the incidents. So generally speaking, it shouldn't be too easily reached, the maximum pressure. Am I correct? At the time of design, the certain scope was considered, but the accident, it surpassed. I'm sorry about this, but this was not really considered. Which means that concerning Unit 1, about 2:30 a.m., the absolute pressure, about 5, that's the design pressure, but it actually went up to 8.4 in the absolute atmospheric pressure. So that happened. And when that was witnessed, what do you think? What did you think that was happening?
Many things are possible. Nuclear reactor, is damaged, or there was a likelihood leading up to the damage of a nuclear reactor. Well, Mr. Nomura momentarily alluded to the possibility of meltdown. The definition of meltdown is very onerous, but probably the damage to the core. So was that the recognition that you had, that the core was being damaged? Within the limited number of parameters we had to think. So the extent of damage, what was the actual situation of the damage, it was very difficult for us to say anything explicitly. And even today, it's very difficult. But the containment pressure went very high, as you pointed out. Design pressure was exceeded. Some kind of anomaly must have been happening. That's what I thought at that time, I'm sure. Now, you talked about design pressure. There is a multitude of standards with which you design certain things. You use such values. Is the object going to be destroyed? No, the total rupture value is different from design pressure. In a severe accident like this time, what is the ability to withstand? What is the extent or point of time of rupturing the containment? I think that kind of thinking was necessary. Well, listening to the discussion, it's very technical. According to Mr. Muto, Prime Minister's office, this time, Prime Minister went to TEPCO head office. In a small room, you had the discussion. At that time, Mr. Muto, do you think that the Prime Minister's office was involved? But do you think that the local matters should be the responsibility of the operator, TEPCO? Was that your feeling? Normally, the primary responsibility of nuclear power plant rests in the hands of operators. We always felt that it is our primary responsibility. However, the accident was very severe indeed, and we alone will not be able to handle many things. So regarding those things beyond our control, like fire department, the self-defense force, the police force, and all other entities' powers we counted on. So regarding these aspects, we needed anybody's help. So government agencies had to collaborate with us. I think the liaison and communication very important. Did you say that opinion to Prime Minister Khan?
No, not at the time. Not at the time. Yes, please. Sorry. And sorry, Heather, for pressing again on that point. Looking at the video taken from the video conferencing system, what we think strange is there was no sound, only the image remains. The video for 1.5 days, for the initial 1.5 days, are missing. But for Fukushima, there are the tapes just for images without the sound. Still a little bit remain, but there is no video image remaining for the very first part. But then the sounds do remain, but the scene that we are taking up right now, no sound is available. So what I have checked is, it is the usual the DVD system. It is just like the usual DVD system for home use. So if you just touch the button, it could be recorded. Why did it happen that the sound is missing for this part? I myself do not know of what happened at all. Sorry for once again insisting on the details. When it goes beyond the design pressure, once it is breached, that everything would be destroyed. I don't think that would be the case. I do not subscribe to that view. But as anomaly was happening, and everybody recognized that, in the early morning, that for Unit 1, the preparation was made for the venting. But then the fuel damage may have happened. Did you think that there was a high likelihood of that? But still, deciding on the venting means that to the atmosphere, the radioactive substances may be released, may be dispersed, may be spread, if I may say so, dare to say so. So, how did you take the decision on this? The decision on the venting itself. When that decision was made, I myself was visiting the towns on the site, in the communities. So the decision was taken between the power plants and the main office. So I was told afterwards of the decision. The pressure of the containment itself, at the beginning, because the power supply had been lost, we were not able to measure the pressure levels. And against that backdrop, the batteries were brought in, and for the relevant instruments, the operators without the lighting had a hard time trying to connect to the instruments. And when they looked at the instruments, 600 the kilopascal or so, it was very high level, have been found by the operators. And immediately the TEPCO thought that the venting was necessary. And the power plant team has communicated with the main office, and Mr. Komori at the main office, they have reported this to the relevant parties and have began the preparation for venting. So those were the developments. Then the radioactive substances to be spread to the outside. You would like to have a filter. For the severe accident response procedures, you didn't have any filters. So why was it that you didn't have any filters installed?
As you rightly mentioned, concerning the containment vessel, that has to contain radioactive substance, and it's about releasing what's inside. That there would be a possibility of releasing radiation. Concerning venting, at the time of the construction of the plant, the function was not available, but in order to improve its safety, various measures were taken, and this is one of them. In a very severe accident, to do the decompression of the containment. The discussions were made about the possible measures. Installing a filter, as you mentioned, that's one option. For our boiling water reactor, that we are using, a huge pool is inside this containment vessel. Several thousands of tons of water are stored there. Concerning the vapor that's released from there, it has to go through this massive amount of water, so a significant amount of radiation can be removed according to a certain data. Globally speaking, let it go through the pool, and then the venting can be done. That's one measure. As you said, using sand or gravel or spraying water, that kind of a device can be installed, and so that the venting can be done through that mechanism. Some nuclear power plants opted for that option. Now, in our case, the BWR boiling water reactor, in our case, we adopted the former methodology. The similar type of the reactors are operating in great number in the United States, and the American power plants have adopted the similar methodology, as I understand.
Are you thinking of economy of that methodology? Economic viability? No, rather than economy, by going through water, a lot of radioactive substance can be removed, radiation can be removed. Considerable amount of radiation can be removed. 1/100, 1/1000 would be the result of the radiation. But even if you add the filter, the same performance can we get? It's an option of technology. It was a matter of technical option. So this time around, the Federation of Power Corporations, I think they were opting toward this facility. What do you think about that? Hitherto, we have introduced various measures of reducing risks. Despite such efforts, such a severe accident happened. So it is really, we are, no words can express how sorry we are. But you see, the venting through the water, the effect of venting through the water was effective, in my opinion. But in addition, you can add one more filter that will enhance safety level even one step higher. I think that was the judgment by the Federation. Now you say going through the water, but from dry well side, you do it directly. That is possible too. But this time, if you do that, it doesn't go through the water. So adding filter is a correct methodology, don't you think? Well, the point you raise is a method of not going through water and venting. That is possible. So we should have added filter. That's your point. I understand. I gather. Of course, that is one concept possible. But what is important in this regard is that even if you had filter, in some way, you had to activate the filter. Within the containment vessel, even if you go through the water or through the filter, at necessary timing, necessary valves had to be opened so that the venting is effected. This time round, the difficult point was this. There was no power supply, and there was no air to activate. So it had to be manual opening. The venting valve had to be opened by people, by hands, manually. So opening the valve must be secured and ensured. So whether water or a filter, the availability of opening the valve was most important.
Now, if I may ask a follow-up question. Now, the discussion you have had, that may be true, but in actuality, the urgency of the venting I believe that has been heightened and increased. That, I believe, was your judgment. Then, did you also consider the fact that there were no filters? And I'm sure that have come up in your mind, I'm sure. Also, how did you feel about that?
Concerning unit number 1, from the late evening on the 11th, the situation of the reactor was getting more and more difficult. And in the wee hours of the night, the pressure in the containment vessel was becoming high. We came to understand that. So the venting was necessary. That was the immediate judgment. Having said that, the environment was so difficult. For one thing, it was wee hours. There was no lighting available. And radiation doses started to rise. And we were trying to get to the site, but the pathways were not available. The roads were broken. There were so many aftershocks. And the aftershocks may actually bring tsunami. So every time there was an aftershock, we had to evacuate. And at the actual site, something called PHS, we were using cellular phones, but such communication, tools were not available. Regarding the necessity of venting, we understood that from the initial phase, but it was very difficult to do so.
So that was the situation. In addition to that, there are procedural problems. You had to make a press release. Prime Minister was coming. Because of these happenings, they may have affected the timing of venting. Did it have the effect of delaying the actual venting? Regarding the press release in the middle of the night, venting was necessary. That was our judgment. And immediately we contacted NAIIC. We reported about that decision to NAIIC. As a result, it was decided that we should have a press release. So at around 3 o'clock, Mr. Komori, Managing Director, and Minister Kaeda have talked about unit number 1, and the unit number 2 was also in a worrisome state. So unit 1 and 2, venting may be needed. So that was what was contained in the press release at that time. Then Prime Minister Kan, on that day, very early morning, he came to the power plant. But at the local site, venting was a necessary means of protecting the containment vessel, so it had to be done. So at the local site, the preparation was underway because it had to be done anyway. Related to that, Mr. Sakurai, do you have a point? The visit of Prime Minister Kan to the local site, 1 or 2 points? Yes, related to that, in the morning of the 12th of March, Prime Minister Kan went to Fukushima related to his visit. Prime Minister Kan came to the site. Mr. Muto, you were there too, right? As I told you, I was making rounds to towns' governments, and then off-site center was open, then I would go. So I was just confirming the situation. And then, in wee hours of the 12th morning, off-site center became operational. That was the report I received. So I went to off-site center. At that time, already in off-site center, METI officials were gathering. Once I went into the off-site center, as you asked, Prime Minister Kan's possible visit was mentioned. I was told about the possible visit by Prime Minister.
So after that, what kind of actions did you take, Mr. Muto? So Prime Minister is supposed to take the command over the emergency situation. So the top person was to be there. So I thought that I should also be there at the present. So I have gone back to the Fukushima Daiichi, the nuclear power plant. So Prime Minister that was coming, so Director Yoshida, the head of the plant, would also be there to receive him. Yes, I think there was certain communication to and fro, but what has been told that the Prime Minister was not coming to the Daiichi power plant, but finally we were told that he will be actually coming to the Daiichi power plant. So I went to the Daiichi, the nuclear power plant, and I believe I have met with Mr. Yoshida to try to have the latest information, and there will be the ground where the helicopter will be able to land. But then the dose levels within the power plant that was increasing. And I wanted to meet with Mr. Yoshida entering the nuclear power plant, but at the entrance, the survey was made for the radiation. There was a long queue there. And if I was waiting, then Prime Minister's helicopter would arrive before me. So I decided I would go immediately to meet with the Prime Minister and receive the Prime Minister's helicopter without meeting with Mr. Yoshida in advance. So I have taken and guided the Prime Minister over to the power plant's office and then met with Mr. Yoshida. So I'm sure there have been different topics being discussed, but very briefly, could you tell us what was spoken there? What was the communication at the time? I have heard that Unit 1 was in a very difficult situation, and my role, I thought, was to explain to the Prime Minister what was happening at the power plant overall. But right from the beginning, Prime Minister have already commented on the venting. So did he say that you should immediately do the venting? Yes, I think he stated that. And how did you respond? What did you explain to him? I do not precisely recall the words that I have used. How exactly I have explained, I don't have the precise memory, but as I have been explaining, right from the beginning, we were aware the necessity of venting. But the site itself was in a very difficult situation without lighting, without any equipment or tools, and the dose levels were high, and then there was no power supply. It was a very difficult situation. So I explained this to the Prime Minister. As Mr. Yokoyama has already asked you the question, the necessity for venting. So in the midst of that process, the Prime Minister has arrived. Was there any impact on the venting process itself? As I said earlier, from the midnight onwards, we were fully aware of the necessity for the venting because we don't want the containment to be ruptured. So venting was a must. So as quickly as possible, we wanted to do the venting. So people on the ground was making the preparation for that. But as I think back from now, I am truly sorry that perhaps the preparation was not that adequate enough. No lighting, no power supply. So the procedure, we were not able to go through the normal procedures. So we had to first of all ascertain what should be the procedures, protocol to be followed, and the people had to carry the casks where there was no lighting, and how to open the valve with hand. We were checking all the necessary the steps to be gone through. But in any case, the preparation was ongoing and progressing on the ground. And I was feeling very nervous and have that tried to give the explanation, and Mr. Yoshida that have come over from the emergency headquarters and have given the necessary explanation to the Prime Minister. Can I ask a question? Please be succinct. Now, that licensee is supposed to take the primary responsibility, is what you have stated repeatedly. So in the emergency situation, that the Prime Minister comes into the picture, comes into the process, what is your reaction for this? What was your thinking at the time? What did you think that Prime Minister, what was the reason Prime Minister was coming to the site? Now, I was told that the Prime Minister was coming and since I was the person responsible for the nuclear power plant, and I thought that I should give the proper explanation and receive him, but I did not know, I don't think I am in a position to explain or state how I thought as to what may be the reasoning for the Prime Minister. But in any case, we have heard that Mr. Yoshida was doing his best on the ground, and he was responsible for the operation there. But in any case, we would like to break for a few minutes and start again at 3:15. So for the second part, may I ask Mr. Muto and everyone else, because of the time constraints, to be very succinct. Thank you.
この際、それでは暫時休憩ということで、
So we will resume at 3:15.
はい、再開は3時15分でございます。
では、どうやよろしいでしょうか。
May we resume the meeting?
最初に最後一つ残ってたのがありました。
There's one thing that was still remaining, Mr. Sakurai. Member of the Commission, Sakurai, I still have another question about the water injection. Water injection was mentioned for a cooling purpose. Technically speaking, I think this was really necessary. Am I right? Yes, you are right. The seawater and the fresh water, is there any difference between the two, seawater and the fresh water? To cool the reactor, for cooling purpose, both have similar effects. But naturally speaking, the seawater contains a lot of impurities. And because of those impurities, it could cause the different problems, and that possibility is higher in the case of seawater than it is with the fresh water. About the seawater injection, from Takekura, the fellow, I think there was the request to stop this. How did you feel about this, the seawater injection? I was at the offsite center at the time, between the nuclear power plant and the main office. The exchange, I saw the exchange in the TV or video. Regarding the cooling of the reactor, as you said, the water injection is of the paramount importance. If fresh water is available, that's better, of course. But from the early time, seawater will do. Seawater would do. That's what I said in the video conferencing. I think that I kept saying that about the seawater injection from the Prime Minister's office. The comment was made from the Prime Minister's office, from the director of the nuclear power plant, that was mentioned about this comment made by the Prime Minister's office with regard to the reason why. I couldn't really understand it very well. But since it was about the Prime Minister's office, including the Prime Minister himself, that was probably the opinion. And Takekura within the Prime Minister's office concerning the injection of seawater. I understood that he was making efforts to get that understanding that the seawater injection would be all right. So the Prime Minister's office's comment and that the seawater injection, that was not approved by the Prime Minister himself. I didn't actually challenge that.
In the interest of time, your answer should be brief. Mr. Muto, earlier on, you said that most important thing is the judgment at the local site, including the Tokyo head office. Instructions shouldn't be issued so frequently. The judgment by the power plant itself was very important. Now, how do you relate that to your answer to the previous question? At the time of initial venting, Prime Minister Kan came to the power plant, and then he went back asking the mobile phone number of Director Yoshida. So the Mr. Yoshida told me through the video conference that the Prime Minister said so. So I gathered that it was the point of Prime Minister. So if the Supreme Commander is of that opinion, then I thought that I should refrain from making any comment. So I sort of acquiesced and I approved after the fact the judgment. Thank you very much, Mr. Nomura. On that particular point, I have a question. Former Prime Minister and Mr. Muto, who has better knowledge about nuclear energy? Prime Minister Kan and Mr. Muto, who has the better knowledge? I met Mr. Kan for the first time on the morning of the 11th. I cannot respond to that question. You said that judgment should be done at the local plant. I think what you mean is that experts are there at the local site. So in that sense, the even Prime Minister's office issues an instruction. You should have explained fully, and you should have acted accordingly. What do you think about this? What is the implication of the judgment? Of course, I was not able to understand, but in a time of emergency, it's a matter not only pertaining to TEPCO. Prime Minister's office is involved in a very large organization. A decision is made, and various things will proceed based upon the judgment. So the top person of that big setup has that view. Then that must be the judgment to follow. That is how I felt about it.
Okay, understood. Now, former Prime Minister Kan seems to have the good knowledge on the nuclear the energy, but it does not mean that he is necessarily an expert. In any case, the person responsible to give the instruction, even though that person may be a layman, you would have to follow the instruction if the instruction is given from the top leader, right? Now, I myself, in the circumstances, I thought that the most important thing was to inject water into the reactor. So for the long hours, be it seawater or fresh water, if the water injection is to be stopped, then I should object. That was my thought at the time. But as to how we should approach the question, because we were the ones to assist, and Mr. Takekuro, who was the one supporting from technology point of view, and I believe he went to the Prime Minister's office and making efforts to explain the situation to the Prime Minister. And I thought that we should wait until he came back. Now, if I may ask a question on a different topic, may I? For risk assessment, I would like to ask a question on risk assessment. The nuclear power plant siting division, for the nuclear reactor, I'm sure you have conducted risk assessment. What is the name of the council which was in charge of the risk assessment? I don't have the accurate name here at hand, but usually it was called the Risk Management Committee. And I'm sure there were several committees within the company to look at the risks. And I believe it is the Nuclear Risk Management the committee, which would look at the total and comprehensive the picture about the nuclear power plants. And you're talking about that, right? Yes. Yes, there was a council or committee established for that purpose. And initially, all sorts of risks were identified and tried to think about the responses to each of those risks. As I look at the minutes, it seems that that was the purpose of this council. But at around the year 2010 or thereabouts, the work for improving on the safety, the quality of the nuclear power plants, and there was also discussion about the limit to the budgeting, and that seems to be seeping into the discussion. Was there any such discussion inside the company about the economics? What you have just pointed out, thinking in those terms. Now, the risk management, the council, it was not that everything would start from there. For the nuclear energy, safety first. Without safety, we can never engage in the nuclear energy. For us who have actually caused this accident, for us to say this, I am at a loss of speech. We were very sorry, but we have given top priority to safety, always. But how to construct the system and regime for the safety? In terms of safety on ground, in the power plants, those people on the site, close to the power plants, what they are most concerned with should be the starting point in trying to build the process for safety. So for the risks, in terms of the managing the power plant, you have to be at the site and watch with your own eyes and try to have it management in the line itself. You have to have this total scheme. And then we should have the cross-sectoral the process for the safety management. And you should also have the total comprehensive management of safety at the head office. So it should be the reporting line and then on the ground as well as at the top management. So when you say safety and quality and economics, whether there was any discussion in-house as to the contradiction of these, I don't think we have had any discussion. Or rather, I should say that I have always negated that economics should be given priority. We should think of the safety first, the most important thing. We should prioritize. I was always trying to think in terms of priorities, the compliance with the laws and the corporate ethics and safety. Safety first, always. And then comes the cost. So, and quality. So the economics, as a consequence, is something to follow everything else. That was my argument. So I have always stated that the results will come later. So safety first is what I have always said.
Regarding your statement, the safety should come first. So suppose that economically, in terms of budget, even it's costly and expensive, then you still should felt that the safety should come first. Concerning piping, for instance, the problematic piping replacement could be very costly. And there were some estimates done to that end. And concerning the backtest issue, again, the anti-seismic reinforcement could be also very costly. I believe that you sensed those issues still, that you felt that safety should come first. Am I correct? Yes. Safety should come first. Safety is the basis. I think that I followed that line of thinking. Well, given that in the meetings that were held at the time, Mr. Muto, yourself, regarding the nuclear, there might be some possibility that there will be some capping employed for nuclear. I think that was your statement, but rather than reflecting your statement, you are actually feeling a sense of caution because of that possible movement to that end. Since it's a company, there are budgets, there is the issue of money, but when we consider nuclear, the size of the cost would also be one of the results. We need to build safety, and then when what's required must be spent. Otherwise, we simply cannot keep nuclear. Even still, it's not just about our plant. It's true all over the world. The highly safe plant has high performance, and also it's economically good. I think that's what we see the world over, not just in our place. So high performance, for the lack of better words, we have to build our discussion from the safety. I believe that we follow that line of thinking.
I understand the position of Mr. Muto. Is it shared within your corporation? Or do you think that you personally adhere to that thinking, so safety must take precedence even at higher cost? If you say something like that, other management team would disagree with you. Cost-wise, it's not difficult. Was that the case? At least, as far as I take responsibility within certain arena, while I took the responsibility within my division, I wanted to do something, this and that, and for the reason of cost, it was refused. No, it never happened in that way. So capping cost-wise, who's going to place a cap on the budget or the cost? Or I don't understand the context in which capping is expressed. Of course, within a company, budget is formed, and then we always have budgetary objective. In doing so, as I said, we should not make orders wrong. First, safety. So safety starts everything, and based upon safety, necessary things will be implemented. If we find out that there is a huge cost, if it is necessary, then it shall be done. Of course, there are certain room where we can maneuver, but safety is the very basic. It is impossible to remove safety or do anything about safety. Again, on the risk management, I would like to ask yet another question. Regarding severe accident, something is likely, you assume something, and you come up with a plan. Did you do that? I think that is a very heavily debated point. Within your company, regarding severe accident, before March 11, did you ever discuss severe accident? On the subject of severe accident, just as we discussed the venting, including the subject of venting, after creating the plant, sequentially we have taken preparatory actions. There was an accident at 3 Mile Island in the United States. That was a big trigger point for our countermeasures. After TMI in a reactor, this kind of accident could happen. So presupposing upon that, the nuclear reactor must be cooled and must be contained. So likely events at the time of design, it's unlikely, but it could happen. So what kind of countermeasures can we think of? So we have made a preparation accordingly. But we experienced this accident, and then, as I afterthought, the preparations that we had made, were not effective one after another. That was the results going through the experience this time. So, as a result, we have ended up in having such a huge accident, and we are very sorry about that.
Now, of course, we may be wise or wiser as an afterthought. So for looking back, we may say certain things, but it might have been very difficult to do at the time. But if what you have stated was the premise, then as you have said earlier, the table with the detailed items, the 4 important risks, that the scheduling for by when the certain actions are to be taken for the certain risks. So in that table, there were no mention of severe accident. And why was it so? Why is it that there was no mention of severe accident? It may not have been written as severe accident per se, but for example, for the offshore Chuetsu, there was a big earthquake, and after that earthquake, we had built the anti-seismic the tower, and not just for the Kashiwazaki Kariya, but also for Fukushima. We have, as a retrofit, built such the seismic design constructions, which were quite useful. But for such structures to become useful means that there has been severe situation like the earthquakes we have seen this time. And we have also had the fire trucks being always be stationed at the power plants, which were quite useful for water injection. Fire trucks were there for the purpose of fire, but the inlet for the water supply that was installed outside of the reactors. So we were able to use that to inject the seawater. And this was also for the emergency purpose. So even though it did not say severe accident per se, but if it was within the design, even though everything was within the scope of the design, what were not supposed to be used or necessary, we have also installed them as well. With the assumption that there could be a certain difficult accidents that could happen. But I'm speechless in that even with all those installments, we were not able to prevent the accident. So, Mr. Muto, you were counted amongst the top management. So this table of important risk management tried to identify all sorts of possible risks and tried to think about the response measures to cope with those risks. So in the division for the siting of the nuclear power plants, I can understand that you had been vigorously trying to prepare yourself. But then you should have had ultimately a corporate-wide risk matrix, starting from the top level of your leadership up until the rank and file employees. So when the risks occurs, there could be major risks, and also probability of the risks are to be multiplied. And if there could be some important risks which could have the major impact, and those would be given priorities. And the severe accident as a term is mentioned there. All of a sudden, the term severe accident is mentioned. So I thought that you were thinking about possibility of severe accident. But as I have continued to read that, you are not taking severe accident as a risk, but rather the risk of regulation becoming more stringent for the severe accident. So how did you regard the risks? I'm sure, or your position as an expert of nuclear energy, but from a top management point of view, if I could hear your thoughts.
Concerning risks, what can be perceived as risks? I think it's open to various interpretation. Concerning severe accidents, from that perspective, the safety of the nuclear reactor might be damaged. That, based on that assumption, the discussions cannot really take place. Let me explain. Because reactor, we are operating reactor based on the assumption that the reactor is safe. So that safety is ascertained. We felt that it was ascertained, but concerning that reactor, for a higher degree of safety, various measures must be taken. Naturally, that's necessary from the beginning. Although the technology was introduced originally from the United States, but there was one control system, but it's now made 3, and the diesel generator was added later. With these additional measures, safety level has been increased and improved. By taking these measures, the overall safety can be enhanced. But regarding taking these actions, the plant, the operation, the schedule might be affected. Or separately, about the licensing and approval, the human resources might be necessary. So there are the possibilities involved. Of course, that must be done, and we do this because it improves the safety. But there are those things that might be required additionally, and with that thinking, I think they have been listed as risks, and I think that's some of the things that you saw.
Your explanation, I understand. But simply put, severe accident, awareness. When you have heightened awareness, then the government will come up with many regulations, and then you have to react to heavier regulations. Then it will involve costs. That's the ordinary managerial judgment. So regulation increases, which will give impact cost-wise, and you follow that line of thinking, and then you have to consider additional funding or financing. It's a positive countermeasures in that situation. So in that vein of thought, you may understand it as a risk. But conversely, you want to avoid to the extent possible. That may be a way of looking at the situation by risk. How would you comment to that? Well, as I have been explaining, with enhanced safety, and then for some different reason you don't like enhanced safety, no, that's not possible. Whatever the case, safety comes first. At a certain level, you are satisfied, and then you don't do anything about it, then the safety level will worsen. So you have to always seek for higher dimension, and that leads into the general improvement of quality. That is the gist of safety. You don't like something, so you compromise safety. No, that's not the case. You demand new resources if that is something which is required. So management must have a solid judgment about having additional resources. I think that is possible in our endeavor. The other day, from NRC, we heard the explanation in this commission meeting. On that occasion, regulation is regulation, he said. It is the bottom line request. It is the minimal request. On the operator's side, you have to have a voluntary restriction or voluntary regulation so that you develop a higher standard of safety by yourselves. And in order to comply with that, you make efforts. That's what he explained, person from NRC. But if your line of thinking is at the basis, regulation is not a risk. Whether, irrespective of the presence of regulation, you should certain safety measures that you should achieve, and then you will identify those measures, and then you will find out the financing availability. So that is the management judgmental procedure that should be there, but I don't find it in TEPCO. The Japanese power operators are led mainly by TEPCO. So TEPCO, but we don't see TEPCO's efforts in ever trying to have enhanced security. So from your remarks, usually that kind of action would come out. But is there a reason for not having that? Commissioner, you are talking about a certain aspect, and I fail to understand concretely what you are trying to get at. Rather, I would say this. So overall power business community has made lots of efforts if there is a safety-related question, or if we want to go even higher, if there are necessary technical challenges, then companies put up money so that we can have a common research to upgrade the technology level. We all study the possibility of enhancing technology level. We did that. Another thing, for example, if incompatible management is done within the power plant, you have all sorts of troubles. Usually, you don't want to talk about it outside the company in other industry, but in the nuclear industry, if there is a problem that should be shared, so there is a common database, so we put our troubles into that common database. If there are major troubles, then we will issue notice, and let's do this about this problem. There is a conference, there is a colloquium to deal with this. Regulation is not the only thing for running our operation.
Just one more point that I would like to ask of you. Now, you were talking about we were talking about the risk management, the council, the minutes. In the survey had made it for the mistake on instrument installment in Fukushima, that it has been revealed that the literature or documents on the equipments that have remained. Do you mean the blueprints, the drafts, for instance, also specifications, or the documents to do with the system design, as well as all the literature to do with the equipments? So as a risk that those documents were not being fully being prepared. So whenever trouble occurs, you will not be able to collect the relevant information that there could be the risks involved in trying to respond to any incident. And that has been pointed out. For Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, you had the awareness and recognition of that. But the process to try to remedy that was supposed to end in the fiscal year 2012. So unfortunately, you were not able to have the regime ready yet. So couldn't you have had a much faster response on that? There is such voluminous documents necessary, and the new nuclear power plants, especially, it had been all made into electronic the forms for all those documents, that you will be able to operate from a distance remotely. But the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plants actually was built back in the 1970s or 60s, which means that everything was in paper, not in electronic form. And initial design, the process that have been followed suit for building power plants, but new equipments have been added, and the routing for the piping may have been changed and revised. And we need to have a proper management of everything. That is true. And we were trying gradually to sort out all the documentation, but it was quite time-consuming. So it was supposed to take until 2012. So as a consequence, the system was not yet ready. And was there any impact in your response to the accident? So far, I don't think there is anything in particular that would indicate that what you have just spoken have had any impact. So after the risk has been identified, there are all sorts of plans and programs, but I think it is too late in many cases. You're too slow. For instance, about the back-checking. The schedule for the ending of the process is too far out. For instance, the closed to the years 2020, for example, 2018, for example. You may be able to finish everything, but thinking about the normal timeline, it is too slow, I believe. It seems that you are so easygoing or relaxed, so to speak. Is there any reason for that?
Well, specifically, what falls into the scope needs to be seen for me to say anything about it. But for any issues, short-term, mid-term, long-term, we need to do that kind of sorting. If it's necessary, then we have to do them immediately. For those items that take some time, for instance, something that requires a lot of preparation, investigation, or sometimes things need to wait for technological development. So for specific items, I need to see them individually. Understood. Thank you. Just a moment, please. Previously, concerning Prime Minister, when Prime Minister made a visit, he asked the cell phone number of Mr. Yoshida, the director of the power plant. So regarding instructions given by Prime Minister to Mr. Yoshida, do you know what the instructions were? I'm afraid I don't know. But his cellular phone number, if it's not known, it's still strange. Haven't you been consulted about the possible request by Prime Minister as to what the possible response, including those things? I think it was mentioned by the people at the site.
Mr. Oshima, relating to Mr. Nomura's question, I have one point. I'd like to raise one point. On the February the 27th, Dr. Meza, former chairman of NRC, came to this commission meeting, and he talked about safety culture in the field of nuclear operators or those workmen, regulators, all stakeholders as individuals. The maximum level of responsibility must be felt regarding the safety of the nuclear operation. It is very important to have that awareness, he said. So, if the staff members, employees, or the workmen, if there are any problems, then the problems would be conveyed to the supervisors. And if there is an expression of safety concern, it is a kind of a whistleblower, but this whistleblower should never be penalized, and this person must be protected, he said. And the safety concern must be fully deliberated at the high level. He said that it's very important, and he said that in the United States it is being implemented. I think it sounds matter-of-factly that such things should be done, considering that aspect in our country. In the past, accidents did happen, like JCO and so forth. And then TEPCO has the character of hiding anything. It's been very much talked about. And then regarding civil accident management measures, tsunami measures, or earthquake responses, or accepting IAEA standards, TEPCO was slow in accepting them, or rather passive, not willing to accept. Those things were mentioned in the past. So in the case of your company, TEPCO, what about safety culture? In order to enhance the safety culture within the company, what kind of training, what kind of education being provided? What is the internal discipline regarding safety culture? Can you explain that? A variety of programs were implemented, I believe, especially in our case. In 2002, we had a major problem, scandal. And since that time, we introduced a mechanism to enhance the transparency of our business. We will disclose whatever the necessary information. So that was the grand premise for having a thorough professional ethics, corporate ethics. Also, we will upgrade the working environment so that we with the completion of manuals and guides and so forth, guidebooks and so forth. You mentioned the point of saying something, raising a point about safety concern. It's very important to visualize the safety concern. Very important. Nuclear sector has a performance PI, the performance indicator. So between head office and the local sites, we manage such indicators. What was done, what was not done, what was the reason for not doing those, not reaching the indicators. I am a part of that discussion. We have done this kind of deliberation continuously. So this PI is common in the whole world, and you can always relatively position, you can visualize the position that you occupy in the world nuclear industry. So we want to enhance the safety level by these programs. You mentioned individuals. Individuals must have the sense of ownership. The safety awareness is very important, as you point out. We have a training program at the power plant, talking about power plants. If you are supervising a group, such supervisors should receive training. For example, the communication with people. What should be done in communicating? If you have a safety concern, how do you find an answer interpreting such a concern as your own problem? In a systematic way, we have the training program. Well, we will visit you, and we'd like to see what kind of programs you have.
My name is Ishibashi. The time is running, but before the accident, I would like to ask some specific questions to do with the seismic safety in the plant. In 2009, in September 2006, September, there has been the seismic back check that was conducted with the NAIIC giving instruction for that. So Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, the unit 5 has become the representative unit, and the interim report that was published in March 2008. And in 2009, June, for the other units, for Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, for units other than Unit 5, the revised interim report has been submitted to NAIIC. For Unit 5, in the Advisory Council under NAIIC, assessment was made. And for the other units, the similar process that was followed is what has been reported. But my first question is, for Units 1 and 3, if I can focus on Units 1, 2, 3, the SS, the standard, the 600 gal, the earthquake, that the maximum design the level that it could be able to withstand that level of earthquake. And are there any equipments and systems where the seismic retrofit the work has been conducted? So did you say from Units 1 to 3 for 600 gal for adopting the level? I believe there were different thinking and arguments. I don't have those notes at hand, so if I could check and inform you later. But if you have done nothing, so 370 gal for the older the earthquakes, that was the standard, that was the level. So you may have had to do nothing to try to clear that level in the formal guideline. But then, when you have made the calculations, then 600 gal would be possible. I think there were the certain systems as such. But in the interim report, for the piping as well as equipments, the number is quite limited, including the control rod, only 7. And the sections of the assessment, the most stringent were being chosen, but only limited and handful of the sections, which means that enormous the part have not been assessed in terms of seismic safety. But as you have prepared the report for seismic safety after June of 2009, can I understand that you have continued with your work? Yes, you can understand correctly. But then, immediately before the 3/11, the process have not been completed. Is that right? Yes, you're right. Which means, then for Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, the 600 the gal, the maximum acceleration assess that you thought we think that the plant will be able to withstand that level of magnitude of earthquake. But then all the pipings and equipments necessary for safety, majority of them have not been checked at all. Isn't that the fact? Whether the equipment or piping can be able to withstand, that could be a little bit different perspective. As you have pointed out, in 2009, we had interim report. These were for the major equipments. If we are to contain the nuclear power plants, for the important equipments, under the new guidelines for the seismic design, that we have checked whether they will be able to meet the guidelines. And for the remainder equipments, we were checking in more of detail, and we were still in the process, and then we met the accident. But for the instruments as well as equipments, on a design basis, we need to look on the basis of the design basis, as was mentioned earlier. But in actuality, whether an equipment that could be destroyed or not is a totally different question.
That's right. But as I look at the review by the NISA, the portion that was actually reviewed, the stress value was calculated, and against that the standard, whether it's because it's below, because it's lower, then that's okay. That's what it showed. So whether that's really shown properly or not, I think is a very important matter. What I want to check is this immediately before 3/11. One another thing, including control rods, 7 facilities, the equipment and piping. There are other systems and equipment that are also important for the purpose of safety. But for the time being, 7 were chosen. In the TEPCO's interim report and also in the review by NISA, that was clearly explained, which means that concerning the important equipment and piping, they are not necessarily checked, and then you are hit by the 3/11. So objectively speaking, this is what has been happened. Am I right? Concerning the magnitude of the seismic wave, I think you are right. But as a result, what was the possibility that the plant might find itself in? From that perspective, 370 gals, or what was thought initially, and what actually happened when I look at the difference between the two, we have used a huge the vibration table. So there is a lot of the latitude when the design was made. I think it's correct to say so.
Continuing on, may I add, originally, unit number 1, you have the turnkey contract with GE, and it was built. Then the maximum acceleration was 256, but in 1978 it was changed to 370, and this time around it is elevated to 600 gal. So in between, you may have done the retrofit and the fortification and so forth. We will have to check. We will have to investigate continually. So thank you very much for this particular point. Next point. deputy general manager, when you were the deputy manager in 2008, June to July, tsunami issue came up. So the in-house study about the tsunami was had, and then a considerably high wave height was measured, like 9 meter to above 15 meter values were shown. Mr. Muto and Mr. Yoshida, including you, those people, such a report came and you studied this particular item, tsunami response. So despite such a topic came up, you did not have any prompt measures against the tsunami. What was the biggest reason of postponing reacting promptly? May I explain the context? May I explain what happened? Fukushima power plant, when we built it, the assumed height of tsunami was 3.1 meter. During the 1965, it was constructed, and at that time, the highest tsunami height experienced along the coast of Fukushima, that was a chilly earthquake-induced tsunami. That was the height. So with that number, we approved a license from the central government. But since then, with the development of technology in mind, in 2002, experts got together and discussed, came up with a report, the assessment methodology of tsunami. There is a Civil Engineering Society standard. The Japanese nuclear power plants are designed and built, and Japanese power plants use this standard. So based upon that standard, we ran a lot of simulations, and we came up, we revised the assumed tsunami height of 5.7 or 6.1 meters. At the initial licensed figure, these revised numbers are 2 times higher than the initially licensed number. At that time, the contents of what we discussed, when it comes to nuclear power plants, we thought that the appropriate safety was ensured with these revised numbers. So we got the new standard. It was based upon the experience of tsunami and adding a variety of uncertainties, and we added the numerical analysis. We came up with the revised numbers. So that was the thinking at that time. On the other hand, the point he raised, the trial calculation, we call it trial calculation. In 2002, the Civil Engineering Society had the standard, but with that standard, maybe earthquakes happened without record. So without record, we did not have to think along the Japan trench of Fukushima. There is a big trench under the sea, and there may be a huge earthquake happening without any historical record. And bearing that opinion in mind, if that was to be taken, what would happen? That was the trial calculation which was conducted at that time. So the wave source model, what kind of wave source model are we going to erect? There was no official knowledge or completed knowledge. So based upon that result, in designing Japanese nuclear power plants, there is a standard, revised standard. So how should we consider that? The experts should get together and discuss this matter once again. So we ask the Civil Engineering Society to revisit this issue.
Now, 1 year before that, which has been mentioned repeatedly, on the July the 16th, 2007, there was the earthquake of the Chuetsu and Kashiwazaki Kariya power plants had been damaged significantly, which was a major incident for the TEPCO. What was the biggest lesson from this? This was a big earthquake, and there were several lessons learned. One thing I can say is that on safety, that even though the earthquake may be beyond the design levels, the safety equipments have functioned well. But in the periphery, for instance, the transmission, the fire had occurred, as well as for the others, as well as the piping for the fire prevention has been destroyed. In the periphery, there were damages being seen. And we had to have additional measures to withstand even a bigger earthquake, and we have taken those measures. Now, in the case of this earthquake, in the active fault at the seabed, that was underestimated, and that may have been one of the reasons. And do you not recall of this? About the active fault itself, as to the epicenter of what we call the FB, the fault of the Chuetsu. I believe you are asking about that. Yes, we did have the assessment even before the earthquake occurred that there could be some activity to do with the fault. But then, unfortunately, we were not able to predict, that is to say, the wave from the epicenter may come over to the very highly complicated topology in Kashiwazaki, that it could be amplified several times. That is, I am truly sorry, we did not actually was aware of that. So that may have been one of the major cause.
Looking at the earthquake phenomena as a whole, the active faults, and also the epicenter, and then the seismic waves that emitted, that propagation until it reaches surface, and also the shaking of the land and the crust movement, tectonic movement after effects. Should that happen on the seabed, then that could cause tsunami as a total phenomena. Those are some of them. In the Kashiwazaki Kariwa was hit by that earthquake. In offshore, it was really out of the assumption that it could happen from that seabed offshore, and because of the complex topology that happened and such the magnitude was not really foreseen. The seismic phenomena was perhaps underestimated, and it was really not enough, in my opinion. At the moment, that was the active fault in the seabed, and also the propagation of the wave. Those were some of the things. But speaking of Fukushima, in this case, in a way, that just merely transformed to the shape of tsunami. So fundamentally, underestimating the natural phenomena was what happened. Being sort of conceited about the prowess, the technological prowess that humankind has. That you don't really think in that way, in your opinion? This time, we experienced this tsunami, and our preparedness against tsunami was inadequate. In hindsight, I feel so sorry about this. But concerning the issue of earthquake and also concerning the issue of tsunami, from externality, the strong force can be exercised. How best we can be prepared for such natural phenomena, as you rightly pointed out. It could have major consequences. From the very beginning, we were fully aware of that. And I believe that we were trying to be well prepared against that. Concerning the earthquake, the size of the seismic wave is one thing, and then in the design of the equipment that would result be hit by the wave, there's a lot of latitude in order to ensure safety. Concerning tsunami, it's possible effects concerning those the possible consequences. The standard was expressed among the experts, and we on our side, we felt that safety was fully ensured. And afterwards, when there are a lot of new findings and insight, based on the assumption that the safety is ensured, it's really the same for the others. One by one, we were trying to reach a higher level of safety. And concerning tsunami, just because we are safe, it doesn't mean that we are okay. To reach a higher level of safety, how best we should do. This is really the judgment of the experts, the Civil Engineering Society. And there is a promotion, the headquarters, and also concerning the Joban tsunami, there was an expert who wrote a paper about Joban tsunami. So based on that knowledge, we wanted them to have a thorough discussion on our part, whatever the results might be. We wanted to adopt those countermeasures as a result of that meeting.
Last point I want to ask. On 8 days before the great disaster, on the 3rd of March last year, TEPCO and 3 companies altogether had an informal meeting with the committee meeting under MEXT. And MEXT was preparing the earthquake survey committee was preparing a report on a gigantic earthquake and tsunami long-term forecast, and TEPCO demanded the change of wording in the report, according to the media report, and actually not by the media alone. In the midterm report of the Independent Investigation Committee by the government, it is mentioned. Did you know about this informal meeting of this MEXT meeting on the 3rd of March? Did you say? Meeting on the 3rd of March, yes. Concretely, I do not have any recollection of being reported about it, but I may have heard about it. My memory is not very concrete. So the Secretariat and power companies had information exchange meeting. Did you have these meetings, informal meetings, in the past, several times? Well, at a appropriate point and an appropriate places, there may have been exchange of information, but I do not have any clear and accurate information about it. Well, with NISA, you have a meeting, you have discussion meetings. And as a nuclear operator licensee, that is the normal path to have a discussion. But the earthquake study headquarters secretariat and power operators have no need to have a discussion. Normal or general public will find it very unusual. It's very unusual route of having a informal discussion. So the general manager of a nuclear power and siting division, you don't know about this channel of discussion. Isn't it a big problem of TEPCO? I have to look into the history, the document from those times. Otherwise, I cannot respond to your question in a very accurate way, concrete way. Well, MEXT wanted to take up science. The experts deal with tsunami and earthquake. They study the possibility. You said that you are leaving up to the experts. So scientific discussion is being worked at this MEXT headquarters. And then power companies go and make requests and demands. Even if you may have been invited by the MEXT, but I think it is a very serious problem. In some cases, I think it will taint the reputation of TEPCO. So I think your division should have had a clear understanding of this information exchange meeting. I hope that you will have an adequate knowledge about that.
Now, as I was listening to your statements, it seems that you have been listening to the experts, including the Civil Engineering Society and so forth, that you were waiting for their conclusion after their deliberations, but the risks and dangers are always there, constantly there. And if you were fully recognizant of the possible risks. So whilst you were waiting for the experts' conclusion, you must have continued to undertake the necessary measures for safety purpose. And about the back-checking, the seismic standards have been changed twice or so. So the safety assessment had to be redone, so to speak. So after once again doing the assessment, have you reported if you have identified any problems, not to the public at large, but to a limited the group of people? Have you made the report? And also, actually, they made repairs, the so-called backfits, or wasn't it the fact that you have taken time to install the backfits and then submitted the report? So there was a time lapse in between, perhaps. Wasn't that the case? And when you say experts, was it adequately wide-ranging enough? Because there were different perspectives on safety. When you say multi-layered, the safety, the protection, for instance, even though you may have had emergency lines for power supply, apart from just one, all the others went down. So when you say it is redundant and multi-layered, just by making it redundancy would not be enough in terms of safety. So was it sufficiently broad-based when you have listened to the views of the experts? You have to have, indeed, the broad-based view. And there are best practices globally. And did you have ample information and also make site visits so that you will be always be abreast with the cutting edge, the leading edge safety, the measures, or not? One thing is that why was it that it took so long a time for the back-checking? The guidelines have changed, and all the power plants on a nationwide basis had to go through the same process. But it was in only a limited facility where we will be able to actually conduct, that is say, the people who can actually do the back-checking was quite limited in number. So we had to have the cooperation and support of those who have originally designed the reactors. So it took time to do that. And as for the best practices, we were not just looking at our own facilities, and we were looking at widely in the whole world and tried to introduce what could be introduced and necessary to be introduced. About the tsunami, I'm very sorry, but we did not actually think or assume that those kind of things may happen, and I'm very sorry that actually it occurred.
Well, civil engineering is one, the construction, the society is another, and there are other organizations, societies in Japan concerning the tsunami. It's always one of the themes. There's the architectural society as well. Haven't you conducted checking on those? Well, evaluation of tsunami. The design standards of nuclear power plants. That was actually created by the Civil Engineering Society. That's the background, so that experts can have a discussion on them. As you rightly pointed out, in order to improve safety, what can be possibly done internally? In parallel, I think that was also handled within TEPCO, in my understanding. Concerning back-check work, when that's done, and then backfitting, I understand that it takes time to actually start doing this. But when you finish back-checking, when those issues are clarified, have you actually made the report? Did you report that regarding those issues when the back-check is finished? Sir, there are certain things that didn't really meet the anti-seismic standards. Did you report the problems or these issues? Back checks were still ongoing at the time. it's necessary, if so warranted, the anti-seismic measures should be handled, that should be conducted. But you said that it will take time to do that kind of enforcement for anti-seismic matters. But as a result of back-checking, you could clarify the problems. Then haven't you actually published that or reported that concerning Fukushima Daiichi? In the process, enhancing the anti-seismic strength, in some cases that was done prior to others, and some of them we gave explanation to the local community. For instance, the land improvement was done when a lot of the facilities were installed, and I did make some report after the work was finished. I made a report, as if the memory serves me correct, that we were going to do that.
Mr. Nomura? Sorry for my soft voice. Mr. Ishibashi asked about the meeting on the 3rd of March. To me, an email has come. So it seems from the record of my email, I have been reported about that meeting. But it is a request from MEXT. They asked us to go, so we went there. So the earthquake headquarters created the long-term evaluation. And we heard their presentation about the long-term earthquake study forecast. And was there anything that we sort of corrected their formulations? No, there was nothing to that effect. I am reported that there was nothing that we demanded. It is an email after the meeting? Or prior to the meeting? MEXT has asked you to go to a meeting. It's not a kind of a meeting where I should say to go or not to go. It is a report after the meeting. May I? You must be tired. I'm sorry. We are continuing on with the questions, but there are some questions that I want to ask nevertheless. We, the general public in Japan, see you on the screen of television after the accident, and we have come to know you and see you through television screens. TEPCO has so many nuclear experts, we thought, and regarding the situation, such experts will explain and provide information. And we were watching the press conference, having that kind of expectation in the discussion today, based upon the fact that the outline of the minutes was published. Earlier on, regarding the possibility of meltdown, a lot of TEPCO experts must have shared the recognition that the meltdown is a possibility. But that was not let known to the general public. Did it occur to you that you should be speaking to the general public about that? Or do you think that some corner asked you not to do that, refrain from making any press announcement about the possibility of meltdown from some corner? Now, regarding the core meltdown, question was whether we could have told the public about the possibility sooner. As I responded to earlier questions, I believe if water injection is not done skillfully into the reactor, in a short span of time, core will be damaged. Everybody believed that. I mean, everybody knew that. But regarding what was going on, for example, the meltdown or melting of the reactor core, it sounds very clear-cut and easy to understand, but definition is very murky. So what we know should be fully explained. That's what we thought. If the radiation was detected, then the fuel is damaged. That we can understand. And part of the fuel may have begun melting. So not by one word to explain, rather than explaining with a simple word, we wanted to fully explain the situation, what was going on. One by one, we wanted to explain to the people. There was no intention of minimizing the impact of the accident or hiding something, hiding anything. We just wanted to follow a solid explanation so that we can ensure accuracy of what we talk about. But as you said, it may have led to the criticism that you spoke of. I can understand that. So with the limited amount of information, what kind of method of explanation was good or should have been preferred? I think that is something that we should be pondering upon very seriously going forward.
Now, the press conference, when you appeared on the television, did you have the question and answer session in advance, internally, or whether you yourself have taken a decision in answering all the questions on ad hoc basis? I believe it was mixed. Because there were certain things that I may not have had the perfect the grasp and understanding, and I might have been given reports and information. And on the other hand, there were certain cases where I have taken the decision myself. For example, on the 17th of March, for the press conference, I believe you have made the statement that for the nuclide, for the nuclides, that there were no measurement gauge for the nuclides. That was explanation. But on the 29th, that on the 23rd, you have already asked the survey, the organization, institution. So you may also have been rather confused looking back from now and looking at the record, the minutes. So even for the executive vice president, accurate information may not have been conveyed. That for the nuclides, the measurement instrument, that it was not there. I think what I have said, meaning that it was not inside the TEPCO's domain office. I believe the beta, about the beta beam, that not inside the TEPCO. That was the intent of my statement. But in any case, I do understand fully that it may be difficult for you to answer to what have happened in the past. But even very recently, there has been a certain cover-up of troubles, and the Japanese people know of this. And the people had a lot of distrust of TEPCO, that no good and accurate information cannot be given by TEPCO. And you said that you have tried to exercise caution, and you didn't want to reveal too much or too many things, and that would be wiser, perhaps, was your decision. As you say, looking back from now, the transparency, it was the key word, that we should reveal everything, expose everything, the facts, whatever that may have happened. And that has been the basic policy, and that was consistently followed. But to try to accurately convey what was actually happening and what is actually understood by the other party, these two are totally different. So how shall I say? I was myself was still wondering, and I cannot really give you a good answer.
Thank you. In your today's statements, Prime Minister Khan, based on the misconception, he reprimanded you, TEPCO, rather harshly, and you made a statement about that. But I think some Japanese people think that your statement should have been much more strong, that it was based on the misperception, and concerning the fact that Prime Minister was actually visiting there. Perhaps at that time, on that occasion, on the spot, on the TEPCO side, you could have made a stronger response that TEPCO was the person who was the direct party involved. Any comment on that? Regarding your comment, yes, I understand where you are coming from, and also the tsunami and severe accident that you have already talked about. Through this accident, what should we have done? What could we have done to prevent this accident from happening? We are the operator involved, and we are still asking questions ourselves, and there are so many issues, and we haven't really come up with a clear answer yet. But concerning the accident, and it's true for the communication as well, but concerning the accident itself, different from our past way of thinking, a new way of thinking, for instance, concerning tsunami and concerning earthquake, we need to come up with something. Otherwise, we cannot really do design work. Separately from the scenario, even if we are hit by something beyond assumption, beyond imagination, at minimum certain things must be ensured. That kind of a flexible thinking is perhaps what was needed. In retrospect, that's the impression that I have, but including the communication issue that you raised. Changing the kind of a way of thinking that we trapped ourselves in, perhaps that new way of thinking might have been necessary. In retrospect, that's how I feel.
That is a very fundamental issue of design philosophy. At the very end, in the interest of time, I'd like to ask a simple question, two questions. Either you can say yes or no. Mr. Ishibashi will ask a question. Very simple question. Mr. Ishibashi, please. The earthquake study promotion headquarters had the long-term forecast, and they came up with the observation, which is different from civil engineering society's standard. And then 2008, TEPCO did some study, you said. In fact, this is mentioned in the midterm report of TEPCO and the government from 2008. But actually, already back in 2002, February, the Civil Engineering Society's standard was issued. Technology was issued, and then in the same year, in July, the earthquake study headquarters issued a long-term forecast, and then as early as in August, TEPCO experts working on tsunami identified the difference between the two. And they were worried about the gap between the two. So they consulted university professors. It's a fact. Did you know about that? Concretely, what kind of professors were contacted by whom, I do not have any knowledge. But naturally, that kind of discussion can take place. Nothing wrong about that. Now, at that time, if company made its a corporate-wide initiative, you should not have wasted 6 years afterwards. Mr. Tanaka. 2 meetings ago, same question was presented to Mr. Terasaka, former Director General of NISA. And he said he didn't know. And the answer was, I don't know. It's a simple question, same question I will give you. Again, the stress test is being applied, and it is regarded as one of the conditions for recommissioning. In relation to the efficacy of stress test, if Fukushima Daiichi had a stress test last year, do you think that the accident in Fukushima Daiichi could have been avoided? It is a hypothetical question. Now, stress test this time takes into the loss of heat source, including earthquake and tsunami. Such things were included. What kind of stress test could be applied? Otherwise, you cannot come up with a simple answer to your question. Now then, very, very last. Ms. Sakizuka, who was living next to you, Hachitsuka, who was living next to you in Fukushima. Listening to your response, this is my personal thought. Today, Mr. Muto is here to answer our questions. We evacuees are very much interested in your presence. What kind of answer would he come up with? Is he going to talk about truth? That was the thought. But when it comes to the crux of the matter, you talk about rules and laws, and you don't come up with the real answer to the questions. That's what I felt. It was the same with the Prime Minister Khan. Mr. Muto, you want to talk about something, but you try to grit your teeth because you knew that you are not supposed to talk about it. So you must be feeling very hard inside because you are not obliged. You are not allowed to speak certain things. Mr. Muto, you are here in this meeting. You have lost confidence from us, but this was the golden opportunity for you to regain the confidence that you already lost. I think it was mentioned in the greeting by the chair, but unfortunately, alas, I did not feel any gaining back of confidence. So going forward, if TEPCO wants to regain the trust that you have lost from the people, going forward, what do you think you need to do? What goes in your mind about what you have to do going forward?
I am truly sorry if there was anything lacks or missing from my explanations. As I have mentioned earlier, as a person who has been responsible for the nuclear power plant at the time, I have tried my best to answer your questions. And if there was something missing or something not meeting with your expectation, I would like to try to the best at a later stage to give you the information. And I have given explanation again and again that safety, it should be given the top priority. And I am truly sorry that I have betrayed the trust of the people. The trust and confidence of the people, when we try to recover the trust, it is a very difficult thing to do. But the fundamental basis is that we needed to assure the technological safety. And what is at the very fundamental basis have been lost, the bias at this time because of the accident. And I am truly regrettable for this, but what is most important is to try to the remedy and try to recover as much as possible for the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant from units 1, 2, 3. We need to continue our efforts and try to ensure safety for that. Another point I would like to make is, as we have always done in the past, trust is what we have always revered. In any case, we would like to show with our own actions and performance. I have talked about transparency. I hope that everything would be made visible so that people will be able to see with your own eyes that the safety is definitely been assured, and that would lead to the sense of security and reassurance. But we have lost the very basis of that. Yes, we are strongly aware of that, and we truly regret of that. We need to start from scratch, to once again rebuild firmly the basis as we go forward.
That you mentioned that you have lost the root of trust. But in order to grow the roots, you need to drill more deeply the ground. Just by extending more roots and the safety and with a sense of ease and co-prosperity and co-symbiosis, we shouldn't be just driven by those words, dear. We would like you to really regain trust so that we can really have confidence in you. Thank you so much, dear. I understand we have more and more questions. We have used more than the allocated time. This is now over the time that we are supposed to wrap up the meeting. Mr. Muto, thank you so much. The next meeting will be held on March the 19th. We are planning to invite the experts from Ukraine to have a discussion. Well, this commission is adjourned. Thank you so much for your cooperation. Communication for people from the press concerning the press conference 50 minutes later than scheduled time. We would like to start the press conference 5:15, 5:15 in this place. Thank you.
ただいまより記者会見を
Ladies and gentlemen of the press, we'd like to commence a press conference. Today, we do not have the presence of the witness. Chairman Kurokawa will respond to your questions. So that will be the format of the press conference. Incidentally, we plan for half an hour press conference. Continuing on from the commission meeting, simultaneous interpretation service is available. So if you are in need of the translation, please pick up the receiver. First, I'd like to call upon Dr. Kurokawa to give his summarization of the discussion of the commission meeting, and then we will accept the questions from the floor. Chairman Kurokawa, please. Thank you. Today we have the 6th meeting of the Commission. We had Mr. Muto, the former Executive Vice President, as well as the General Manager of the Nuclear Power and Siting Division of TEPCO, who was at the helm of the responsibility at the time of the accident. We had the discussion regarding the concept and philosophy on severe risks and the situation, the cause of the accident. Regarding the direct and indirect cause of the accident, the discussion today was very valuable. Today, we heard opinions of Mr. Muto. What we gained in a rough summarization would be summarized in the following points. The first one is the relationship with the local site politics and TEPCO. Another one is regarding the evacuation and venting. The operator licensee power company and the relationship of the Prime Minister's office, we felt that they were not fully convinced about the Kante's involvement. Especially the Director Yoshida's mobile number was asked by the Prime Minister, and the surrounding officials and the people did not know anything that was discussed. The second point is the power of the local site. Mr. Muto said that the local site has the primary responsibility in responding to the accident. On the other hand, was it equipped with the capability and competence to deal with that as TEPCO as a whole? It wasn't so clear. As a matter of consequence, it took time before venting. Hydrogen explosion happened, so we need to verify various processes and events during the accident. The third point Prior to the accident, there was certain preparation, but we did not feel that the prior preparation was adequate. It's called the safety culture. The seismic resistant programs were introduced according to Mr. Muto, but we still wonder whether they were fully prepared for the eventuality of the accident. I think this uncertainty was reassured. For example, on and after 2006, questions were asked about the seismic back check. So immediately prior to March 11, certain facilities were not ensured about the seismic resistance. Equipment and piping were not ensured or verified. And tsunami was the overall cause of the accident according to TEPCO, but 2002 tsunami forecast was made, and at the local plant side, the risk was recognized. The risk had been recognized. There were certain people who recognized that, naturally, but Mr. Muto was not fully aware of such awareness of the preparedness or the shared safety culture within the corporation. Probably the concept of safety culture was not fully permeated throughout the corporation. So those main points were the impression that I can summarize of the discussion. So as far as our commission is concerned, what are we going to do going forward? So a great disaster became the trigger for the accident. And there are so many documents and interviews. Just to follow those documents and literatures, it's an enormous work. But overall, there is a heavy burden upon the task of this country, Japan as a whole. So the victims, survivors, as well as the disaster-affected people, evacuees, speaking from their position, our commission must work, must step up our efforts to look toward the issuance of the report that we target in the month of June. At the very outset, we mentioned the questionnaire survey at our commission. What is the current state of affairs regarding the evacuation? So we are soliciting cooperation of the evacuees. We also have the cooperation of the municipalities. We conduct the questionnaire survey so that we have the complete picture of the evacuation. Roughly 55,000 households were given, they gave the permission to do this questionnaire survey. It's not complete yet, so we are sending out a questionnaire survey. It's been third day, and the 10-some% response rate is registered. I look at the situation. I have many thoughts. There are so many people writing so many things, even to the backside of the questionnaire sheet. So there are heart-wrenching points that they express on the sheet. Eventually, we will be making an announcement about the result of the tally of the question sheet. It's been only third day since we issued the question sheet. We have more than 10% of response rate. So that is what I hear from the officials in charge of the questionnaire surveys. So this is the current progress status. Everybody's working very hard. Commission members are working day in and day out, having a lot of work to do. So we need your continued support so that we can have adequate dialogue with the people at large. Through the media people. We have the simultaneous interpretation. It is a live cast, not only in Japan, but we hope that this communication, this dialogue could be heard across the world. Thank you very much.
Then, ladies and gentlemen of the press, we would like to accept the question. Those of you who have questions, please raise your hand. And when you're designated, the staff will bring over the microphone, and please identify yourself by stating your name and affiliation. We would like to entertain as many questions as possible, so if you could limit to just one question each, please. The person in the third row at the very end, please. My name is Kobayashi from NHK. You were talking about the video conferencing system of the TEPCO, that the commissioners that have seen the videotapes. How did you see the video and in what way? And you have also mentioned that where Prime Minister Khan appears, that there was no sound available. So if I could have your impression, Dr. Kurokawa. When I first heard of this, I was surprised. And we have, or the member of the working group requested, and they have seen the video, and they have reported to me, and that was included in the questioning during the commission meeting. Any other question, please?
Please use the microphone. If you need interpretation, please use the microphone. I didn't see everything. I think there are a lot of them, a lot of recordings. And as Mr. Tanaka mentioned, he was following about 1 hour or so, and I think that was raised as a question.
Next question, please. Nanao Nico Nico Doga. Again, repeating the question. To the national public, the image can be made public. Do you have an idea of publicizing that image? If you want to do that, what will be the time frame of making that video available? And also, the users had questions. Some sound track was lost in a part of videotape. That's a question. The DVD you obtained is a master DVD, or they hastily erase the sound? Do you have an idea of following through the fact that sound is lacking? We didn't obtain that. They just let us see the video, the DVD. But just like this commission meeting, everything should be open. So the primary source is something that the Japanese people should confirm. So the original image should be shown to the Japanese people. Japanese people have the rights to see them. As NAIC, do you have a plan of making it public? To the extent possible, we would like to cover the report, and we want to include everything into our report. It is our responsibility. So you don't have the idea of publicizing the image? I don't think that is our duty. We requested and we were shown the video. That is all.
The next question in the front row on the far end, please. Mokuyama from Mainichi Shimbun. In February, I've had a contact with the Minister Hosono. In the website, the outline is given. But if you do you have any thoughts to publish the detailed minutes of the meeting? Minister Hosono wanted to explain about the new bill. And what we have made public here, and I have explained to him that there are certain challenging the problems. But you were the subject of the survey, so there are certain doubts that you were having some secret agreements. No, that was not the purpose of our meeting. Then you should try to disclose what you have done in detail. You need to give the explanation, what kind of questions you have asked of the minister. That should be made public to explain to the Japanese people. That, I believe, is to do with the judgment. That is a judgment call. I have been asked and I have given explanation, but the rule was not to contact with the parliamentarians. No. If it's the minister, I didn't think of any reason of refusing that. But my judgment was that we didn't have to disclose anything we have discussed. But isn't that in transparency? No. The minister said that he wanted to explain, so I thought it would be okay for me to meet with him, because minister wanted to give the explanation to me on the new bill, and I had no reason to refuse. It is not that I have asked him. And was it you who decided that it should not be disclosed? For the commission meetings, we are made public, but for the interviews and such, we have not made public. So in the process of that, it was not disclosed.
Please.
質問、水ドイツ南ドイツ新聞内田と申します。Some of what was obviously inconsistent with what TEPCO said before. Now, how do you assess his truthfulness? And do you now regret that you can't make him give his deposition under oath? Thanks.
ちょっと質問の意味はわからないんですけれども、ここで聞いたこと。
I didn't understand the gist of your question. What we heard from his remarks, there was no consistency between what TEPCO had said and what he said in this meeting. Is it what?
Consistent between what he said now and what TEPCO said before. So what is truthful? And do you think he should say give his deposition under oath anyway?
それは私たちが
I don't know whether that is something that we should be verifying. We are acting according to the rule. So it's up to you. What do you think? But I think we are doing according to the rule.
Any other questions? The person in the middle, the brown jacket, please. Freelance, my name is Fujita. The commission such as this, whether this should be done in public or not, I'm pretty sure that was discussed at the initial phase. There must be pros and cons of making it public. As a chair, what do you think of those pros and cons? Because the person who was living near the nuclear power plant said, Mr. Muto, senior vice president, looks like that he wanted to say something, but he was clenching his feet, he was grinding his teeth, he didn't say. So what's the truth? What are the countermeasures? What should be the countermeasures? For this commission to assume this role, I think there might be some obstacles in keeping it public. So your comments on that, please. Regarding that, as the Act says, in principle, should be public. So whether everything should be made public or not, I think this is up to us to decide. But in principle, it should be public. So as much as possible, we are making it public. Anything else?
Any other question? Yes, the person wearing a sweater at the center, please. My name is Miyajima from the monthly magazine, The Factor. Now, the ministers and the prime minister, the top leadership and the relationship with the site and the TEPCO headquarters, the relationship amongst those would hold the key. So the prime minister and Minister Edano, including, and also Minister Kaeda, including those people who are on the fifth floor and so forth. And the Diet has already done, but to ask them to be the witness at this commission, perhaps at the early stage, you need to do that. For the Prime Minister's office, the fifth floor for the people, are you thinking of asking them to be the witness at this commission? And TEPCO, their explanation is not sufficient enough. As Dr. Kurokawa has mentioned, that the cell phone number of Mr. Yoshida has been asked, and President Shimizu, who had communication directly with Minister Kaeda, I'm sure all of those things must also be revealed. So I would like to ask about what may be your decision and the footworks, so to speak, going forward. That is what we need to decide and judge, and we will eventually going through those steps. But when and who is what we are discussing right now. That would depend on the case. I'm not really sure whether we would be able to go to that extent. Of course, the manpower constraints and such, that must be thought about. And as gradually things are being revealed, how to deal with them with the limited manpower is a question. Yes, that we are making efforts. Any other question, please?
In the back row, someone in the middle, please. Yes? Sankei newspaper, my name is Oya. About the video conferencing, about the sound, to the extent you know, let me know. Since when do we have that, and for how long, for how many days it was recorded, and which portion did you see? I didn't actually see this myself. It's part of the investigation. So since which date is there the record? Why don't you ask the question to them? TEPCO, are they holding the press conference every day? Aren't they? And everybody can be there. So I think one way for you to ask this question is to use that. May not my place to say this.
Other question? The person in the center? Front row? Freelance journalist Kino. The image of a video conference, basically, since when TEPCO does not talk about it, and whether they have it or not, TEPCO does not make it clear in their press conference. That's why we ask this question at this Commission's press briefing. If you can confirm, especially at your Commission from the first day of the accident, I think there is a need for confirming with the TEPCO about the presence of the tape. We are investigating it. We are in the process of investigation. So not only the portion that you talked about yesterday, but other portions? Well, I cannot make any comments. We have a mandate. So how much is it related with our mandate? I am not sure. What about the necessity of verifying it? Well, my question is, what do you think, the media people? We believe it is necessary. Then what is the work that you can do on your side? Well, is that it? Well, we will prioritize on our work. But the information, are we going to do that? That's a strange question that should come from the press.
Next question, please. Yes, in the front row, the person next to the camera. My name is Nishinaka. I'm a freelance journalist. Before the press conference have started, you have briefly explained about the questionnaire survey. In the Fukushima prefecture, the 12 municipalities were those subjected to the evacuation orders. So I believe the developments until the designation for the evacuation, it started from 10 kilometers, the 12 kilometers, the 20 kilometers, and 30 kilometers from no entry zone to the restricted area planned evacuation zone, as well as the deliberate evacuation areas and so forth. It has gradually been expanded as well as upgraded. In any case, basically within the 10 kilometers, they have had to evacuate. But then in the middle and towards the end of March, there were many people still remaining because certain experts went there and said that it was quite safe, like Iidate, the village, as well as Tamura and so forth. But ultimately, the planned evacuation zone was designated. So before going to these 12 municipalities, you must investigate how the zones that have been decided. So 50 millisievert, and there are 3 categories in terms of the half-life, the period, and so forth. You needed to verify on the steps that have been taken. If you just limit to the 12 municipalities, the source of information may be quite limited. So would you be willing to make a survey here on much broader areas as well as in the other aspects? Well, the zoning or the categorization, as you may so, you have to base yourself on different factors like radiation and so forth. And we have not seen any the research that have been done for everyone. So we have thought about the random the selection. So we have ultimately decided on the 20,000 households. In any case, in the backdrop of that is the response. How we analyze the response of those who are surveyed would hold the key. And then after make the analysis, then on top of that, you should also make investigation how the zoning and areas have been decided. Now, after we made the analysis, maybe we should consider and think about how we would go about. In setting the areas, we have limited to just 12 municipalities, but for the persons who may have evacuated most probably. We have selected them, and there were in total 55,000 households. And on a random basis, we have selected 20,000 ultimately. What about the health issue? The initial or the exposure to radiation, so forth. You would be including that information in your questionnaire, and also how the government responded as well. That will also be questioned. We will be looking at the actual situation and circumstances of evacuation. The health is actually excluded. We have Ms. Sakiyama and so forth as a commissioner, and how to control about the health effects and so forth is relevant. We are trying to provide assistance for the evacuees. If it be too large a group to be assessed, it may be meaningless. We have to have the methodology. So we have chosen this method. And there are people who are responding and writing in their comments in detail, but some do not. Any other question, please?
Fourth row, someone in the back, the person in the back. Freelance journalist, Kamide is my name. Overlapping with the questions, the prior questions, you summarized today's commission, and looking into the root causes is very important, and preventing the occurrence is also important. Many issues are happening at the same time. As was mentioned before, the media power cannot be actually reached, and several things have remained unpublished, even it's still midway. And when the general public have questions, it should be published. You are the only organization that can use the administrative investigation rights. I think there was a comment made from the government investigative committee. There are the questions asked from the general public, and to what extent can you take that kind of alternative activities to the explanation that can be done because of that administrative investigation rights. If you have that, I would like you to share that with us. In principle, when we reach a certain consensus, I think we can share that with you. But this is still an ongoing process. I would like you to wait until June. That issue, for instance, regarding the regulatory agency, that's urgent. That's why that was already shared with you. So from that perspective, I think there are many questions that the general public want to ask. To the extent possible, we would like to answer them. But to what extent can we actually meet the expectations is rather difficult for me to say. Because about the investigations are ongoing, hearings are also ongoing. So all I could say at this moment is to please look at what we are doing.
Time is running short. So the person in the second row, please. Suzuki Asahi Shimbun Newspaper Company. Again, the video clip from a video conference. There is one point I want to confirm with you. There is a lack of a soundtrack. According to TEPCO's explanation, it wasn't recorded from the very beginning, or in providing the video, the sound was erased. Was there an agreement if the case is the latter? Then you have a very strong investigative authority bestowed by the National Diet. You should be very strong. So I think because of the legally constituted investigative power, I think the video with the soundtrack is necessary for your investigation. According to what we heard, sound was not accompanying from the very beginning. That's what we heard.
So the last question. The person in the third row at the very end, please. Yamazaki from NHK. Now, at the very beginning, you have given us a summary of the commission meeting. And I believe there were some comments from the members of the commission. But frankly, Mr. Muto seems to have done his best. That's to say, that he has trying to defend himself in his comments, that he has done his best. But at the end, what he said have given the very essence of the testimony, that they should have had perhaps more flexibility in thinking of the different standards, and perhaps that may have been the reason why they were not able to prevent the accident this time. So what I would like to ask you, Dr. Kurokawa, is after interviewing Mr. Muto, so where were the key points of his testimony, would you say? I believe the impression would be different from person to person. So my own personal impression would be they have their own position in their own capacity to think about the country, think about the people, and try to take the responsibility in their job, commensurate with their position. Everything would boil down to that question. So, no more question? Okay, thank you very much. We have, sorry, then one last question, please.
The minutes from the headquarters concerning the nuclear disaster, we have now those minutes. But from Mr. Kurokawa to them, these are really the minutes of the proceedings. But there are those backup memorandum and the others, I'm pretty sure. But the administration your commission, to what extent have they been cooperating? To what extent have they been submitting them when you demand the materials? To what extent have they been collaborating with you? This has been studied, and regarding the materials, we are receiving them, but we don't know how much we have received, whether that's going to be 20% or 10%, 50%, because we don't really know the denominator. It's difficult to say. Previously, TEPCO, and as a witness, it was mentioned that the requests have been expressed, but some resistance has been felt. Regarding witnesses, have they been cooperating, or are they coming up with some kind of excuses? And is it rather difficult for you to get that kind of cooperation from witnesses? So far, I haven't felt so much difficulty.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. With this, we would like to conclude our press conference. Would that be all right? Well, after all, Ms. Hachiska, she lives right next to Fukushima Daiichi power plant. And she used to live there, and she made a comment. That was really touching, what Ms. Hachiska said. Come to think of it. We went that area with the commission members staying over one night. So then we came in direct contact with the evacuees, and just like in the case of a questionnaire survey, we would like to reflect the wills of the people, Japanese people. Next week, on Monday, 19th of this month, from 1500, we will have people from Ukraine, Chernobyl-related experts. So we will have 4 witnesses. I hope that you will be present at our next commission meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming.